Viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Good evening, everyone. And of course, welcome back. Yes, to another very exciting episode of Red Pill News Live. I want to give a big shout out to the Nun Report who just rated the channel. Thank you for that, buddy. Appreciate you. If you're arriving here from another channel, do me a favor. I would sincerely appreciate a follow, subscription, hitting that like button, thumbs up, red pill, whatever platform you are on. Thank you very much for being here. If you don't know, my name is Zak Paine, and this is another edition of Red Pill News Live. Today we have a lot to discuss. Lots going on in the world of fraud. You see, Nick Shirley just dropped another video, this time from California. The last time Nick Shirley took on a state government, a candidate for governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, was forced to drop out. But the only thing is, today it's not just about Nick Shirley. You see, O'Keefe Media Group has also dropped a big expose on fraud taking place in California. And what's interesting is that the office of Governor Gavin Newsom has already responded to the idea of fraud taking place in his state. He has been forced to reply after one video from Nick and then another video from James. It's unavoidable. They've got a problem, and it's much, much bigger than what they had in Minnesota. So do me a favor, everyone. If you haven't yet, hit that like button to help us out by sharing the show. Sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn, because we're going to be right back after this. So new inflation numbers are out of Washington, and it shows that once again, inflation is on the rise. That's another threat to you, another threat to your savings account, and of course, also your retirement. So you got to ask yourself an honest question here. Does your dollar go as far today as it did 10 years ago? Well, what about 5 years ago, even last year? Then what does the next decade look like for you and your savings? Because if your portfolio lacks exposure to gold, one of history's most reliable economic hedges, it's about time to rethink your strategy, because gold has kept up with inflation, and in many periods, it's actually outpaced it. My friends at Noble Gold Investments specialize in helping people protect their wealth using physical gold and silver. Whether you're going to roll over an IRA or make a direct purchase, their team walks you through the entire process, and they make it super simple. There's no pressure, just education and experience. And right now, all new qualified accounts are going to receive a free 1/10 of an ounce America Gold Eagle as a thank you. To find out, you can visit noblegoldinvestments.com/redpill78 and discover just how easy it is to protect your financial future. Once again, that's noblegoldinvestments.com/redpill78. And when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, good afternoon and welcome back. Thank you very much for being here. Hope you guys are having a lovely day. Yesterday, as we began the show, I told you about President Trump and J.D. Vance doing the live signing ceremony for the Fraud Task Force, which is going to be a whole of government effort. Essentially, every various members of the cabinets that President Trump has brought together, every various member from his cabinet and those offices of the federal government he has brought together under the authority and tutelage of J.D. Vance to investigate fraud taking place all across the nation. Most importantly, not only to figure out whether or not it exists, but to find a way to stop it before it happens again. And even more importantly, to bring the guilty to heel. And most importantly, to recapture the trillions of dollars that have been stolen from the United States of America. Now, during that signing ceremony yesterday, President Trump specifically called out Ilhan Omar. Obviously, she is of Somali descent. She is a congresswoman from Minnesota. She has directly benefited from a number of those fraudulent schemes taking place still to this day in the state of Minnesota. And of course, she is more than likely, according to a number of people, guilty of immigration fraud. President Trump directly mentioned that immigration fraud and the fact that Ilhan Omar had married her brother. So we're going to take a look at this clip and get the show started. Now, it's no surprise to me that President Trump directly slammed the nation of Somalia and, of course, Somalian Representative Ilhan Omar while he was signing that executive order yesterday. He noted that she, yes, married her brother. She's here illegally. And he said that the first ever task force to investigate fraud looking into federally administered housing, food, medical care, and cash assistance programs was going to bring results for the American people. Now, this task force is going to advise the president. It will also coordinate in this government-wide effort to combat the widespread fraud, waste, and abuse that is present in all federal benefit programs. I really like this because it's sort of the offspring of Doge, if you will. The idea of taking on fraud, waste, and abuse came in hot and heavy at the front end of President Trump's second term in office. It continued throughout the scheduled, prescribed time that it was supposed to be in operation. And then Doge sort of broke off into individual offices within each and every one of the federal agencies. And now we have an entire government task force that's going to be taking on fraud, waste, and abuse, specifically looking at these entitlement programs, which we know are rife with all of those things. Chaired by J.D. Vance, the vice president, Federal Trade Commission Chairman Andrew Ferguson will be the vice chairman. The task force will coordinate measures to improve eligibility verification, implement prepayment controls, detect those high-risk fraud trends, disrupt and dismantle those fraud networks and the mechanisms through which fraud is actually committed, thereby ensuring that in the future we can make sure that this fraud doesn't continue to take place, because the longer it's allowed to continue, obviously the more money is siphoned off, going into the pockets of fraudsters and denying the people of America their ability to perhaps have access to those programs, or to deny us having to be charged higher taxes. If it wasn't for all of this fraud, waste, and abuse, I suggest we probably wouldn't have to pay taxes at all. Now, the order also highlights the massive and specific organized ring involving those Somali immigrants, of which, of course, Ilhan Omar is a member. And many of those programs, including Feeding Our Future, as well as the daycare programs, the Medicaid fraud programs, the transportation fraud programs, all of them seem to be run in Minnesota by Somalians. But we've seen the Somalian fraud grift extend to other states as well. We've documented it pretty well in Ohio. We've documented it to some degree in New York. We've documented it in the state of Maine. And today, with Nick Shirley's new video, we're also going to be documenting it in the state of California. They note that there is strong reason to believe similar vulnerabilities exist in each and every one of those states I mentioned: California, but also Illinois, New York, Maine, and Colorado. Sufficient or insufficient, rather, safeguards and weak oversight have increased the risk of large-scale fraud. And Somalia's third world, President Trump said, maybe a fourth world nation, one of the worst, one of the most dangerous. They don't have anything. They don't have councils. They don't have government. They don't have police. They shoot each other all over the place. Now, while he was highlighting this estimated $19 billion in Somali fraud in Minnesota alone, Trump described Ilhan Omar as one of the ringleaders, and he called for her to be removed from the country. Please, thank you, Jesus. Let's go ahead and make it happen. Denaturalization. Kick her ass out. Also, thank you so much, C's in Pixels. Looks like perhaps you might have raided the channel, or maybe you're just hanging out and you're talking to a bunch of people. Either way, glad to have you here, buddy. He says, I hope this is part of it, as we all hope it is part of it, Mr. President. But she married her brother, supposedly. I mean, there's a lot of documentation, but that means she's here illegally. She's a congresswoman, and I hope you're going to be looking at that, or somebody is, right? Meaning he wants J.D. Vance and this brand new fraud task force to take a good, hard look at Somalian immigrant Ilhan Omar and tell us whether or not she actually is here illegally. I mean, I can't tell you how many times over the last several years I've heard that there was going to be an investigation into this subject directly. It's about high time that it actually happened. Now, yesterday, we actually ran through most of the text of that executive order. But if J.D. Vance can secure high-profile indictments, if Ilhan Omar's citizenship is actually investigated and revoked, Lisa and I were talking about this last night, he undoubtedly is going to be the candidate in 2028. He will also undoubtedly be the man elected to lead the nation in 2028. But if Attorney General Pam Bondi does not bring charges, then the findings of J.D. Vance are obviously going to be basically meant for nothing. What we need is a DOJ that is going to be willing to work with this fraud task force. Now, of course, Pam Bondi has done plenty during her time in office, but people have a lot of criticisms for her. Of course, she's not the one directly choosing who's going to be indicted every single day across the nation. That's why we have different offices for U.S. attorneys in every single state. One of the biggest problems, I would suggest, is not necessarily Pam Bondi or the DOJ at all, but it's going to be the lack of U.S. attorneys in certain jurisdictions. And I'm going to be telling you something what just happened in New Jersey earlier today or late yesterday, which directly ties into this. Now, when J.D. Vance was discussing this in the Oval Office yesterday, he touted his recent action alongside Dr. Oz to withhold Medicaid funding from Minnesota after all of this evidence of fraud came to light, primarily coming from illegal immigrants, but most importantly, also coming from plenty of naturalized American citizens. They were defrauding the United States of America and by proxy you and I, my friends, using the autism assistance programs, falsely claiming all of these kids were autistic, even though none of them probably were. You have all of these kids all across Minneapolis, all across Minnesota, who suddenly are autists, and of course they have to get special money for the programs that they need. What that does is rob the actual autistic children of the necessary tools and attention that they would otherwise receive. And it also robs legitimate autism centers of that federal money that would go to help those children. Instead, you have Somali fraudsters stealing that money, putting it in their pockets, buying Bentleys or buying property in Kenya or Nairobi. But it has to stop. We have to make sure that these people are not allowed to continue doing this. Otherwise, laws don't mean anything. And if laws do not apply to the criminals, then I ask you, my friends, why in the hell should laws apply to us? I think that that's a fair question. And if laws are going to be selectively enforced and certain people are going to be allowed to get away with criminal actions, then why would anybody take them seriously at that point? And unfortunately, I know a lot of people are already there. Now, this task force using this whole of government approach is looking to stop the fraud being committed against the American taxpayer. It's going to go after the fraudsters. It's going to help American citizens. It is going to bring together these previously non-communicative governmental agencies, allowing for a level of coordination that simply did not exist before. This is another major problem that I don't know if people really understand. The bureaucracy of the federal government, the insular nature of these different agencies and these different offices. They don't necessarily have a 100% information sharing portal. Everybody does not know what everybody else is doing. A lot of people stay within their own lane and they just simply don't pay attention to what people are doing in other agencies. And then, of course, you also have a problem with people who have been hired who are simply not worth the shit on the bottom of my shoe, to be frank. Okay, they're not people who should be working in positions of public trust or positions of power, but they have a relationship with someone, and so they get hired in. And until President Trump came back and changed the way things work in the federal government, they could essentially stay there forever, never having to do anything. Well, my friends, that is changing now. Let's go ahead and hear that clip of President Trump talking about fourth world Somali scammer Ilhan Omar. And I'll probably just need to get past this commercial real quick. Okay. And let me turn this up.
First ever. And everyone knows they've been cheating for years. It's the first ever. And it's got to be stopped. I mean, it's got to be stopped. Think of it, Somalia is a third world, maybe a fourth world nation. One of the worst, one of the most dangerous. They don't have anything. They don't have councils. They don't have government. They don't have police. They shoot each other all over the place. They come here and they steal $19 billion. That's crazy. And Ilhan Omar, I hope this is part of it, but she married her brother, supposedly. I mean, there's a lot of documentation. That means she's here illegally and she's a cock.
DOJ, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. First of all, I didn't go to Yale. Second of all, I didn't love Pence. Okay, so I don't know, dude. I've been doing this show since 2018, and I started doing it because I was a fan of President Trump. Also because I had been paying attention to politics and the corruption of the U.S. federal government and the global deep state, the global criminal cabal, since I was very, very young. And I continue to do it because I believe in the work that President Trump is doing. I'm also not blind, like apparently you are. You're obviously completely jaded and you believe that nothing will ever change. That's totally cool, dude. You go ahead and just run with that. I'm going to do me. And I'm going to continue to have relentless optimism in the face of a lifetime of darkness and evil. I have seen where this goes, and I've seen how close the United States came to being completely overtaken. And now I see the changes that are being made. And I will be honest with you, I never, ever believed that what we are seeing now would happen in my lifetime. In fact, I did not think it was possible. So now, having witnessed this dramatic turnaround that we're witnessing in the United States, yeah, of course, I feel good about it. But, you know, I don't think you really know me, bro. I think you're just here talking shit. You came in here immediately talking about stuff that I wasn't talking about. So either hang out and take a listen, enjoy a respectful conversation, agree to disagree, or just go someplace else because, like, it's, like, totally unwarranted.
Congresswoman. And I hope you're going to be looking at that, or somebody is, all right? Because she's one of the ringleaders here. She's bad news, really bad news. She's so bad for our country. Anyway, JD, please say a few words.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Mr. President. This is a very important whole-of-government approach to tackle the fraud problem. And let me just tell one story. One of the things that even before this executive order was signed that we were able to stop under the president's leadership is we saw evidence that in Minneapolis there were Somalis, primarily illegal immigrants, who were defrauding a Medicaid program that was meant to go to autistic children. So they were taking children who were supposed to get benefits and they were claiming that their kids were actually autistic even though they weren't. And what did this mean? This meant two things. Number one, you had a lot of people getting rich off of the fraud while American citizens got poor. And the second thing that it meant is that you had autistic kids in Minneapolis, in suburban Minneapolis, who weren't getting benefits they needed because Somali fraudsters were literally stealing out of their pocket. It's got to stop. And unfortunately, that kind of fraud is one example of probably hundreds.
So just for anybody else out there who may be blackpilled, how many years does everybody think that this was going on? And for how many years did, like, normal, average, everyday people recognize that these scams were taking place? And for how long did agencies within the state's government or the federal government just choose to ignore it? And now, here it is. They're actually calling it out. They're working to make sure it stops and to make sure that it doesn't keep happening. You're telling me that nothing's happening? Okay.
Just within the state of Minneapolis, and then it's repeated and replayed all over the United States of America. When we first started talking about this problem, the president made it very clear he wanted us to take the fraud problem seriously because nobody had until he was president. We started to figure out one big hole that existed is that the agencies of the government weren't actually talking to each other.
Amen.
The
there we
Treasury
go.
would have evidence of financial fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Justice about it. Health and Human Services had evidence of Medicaid fraud, but wasn't talking to the Department of Treasury about it. So what this executive order does is force the entire apparatus of the federal government to do two things. Stop the fraud in the American taxpayer and make sure that the benefits that ought by right go to American citizens and not to fraudsters. Andrew Ferguson will be the vice chair and is going to do a great job. If you're curious what's the difference between the vice chair and the vice chair is going to do all the work, and I'm going to take all the credit. Andrew.
Yeah, look, I mean, millions and millions of Americans pay into these programs every day, and they expect to get something out of it. And this fraud is just siphoning money that millions of Americans pay to fund their hospitals, to fund their daycare centers, into completely fake businesses. It isn't just unfair to all of us as taxpayers who pay for all this. It's particularly unfair to the Americans who need this the most and watch this money leave their hospital, leave their school system, and go out to fraud. And that is why this effort is so important. And I think we've just begun really looking at this, but I think that one of the things we're going to find is that in a lot of these agencies, the previous administration was pretty lax about existing anti-fraud controls, and we're going to expose that too.
I would take the word pretty out. I would change it with unbelievably lax. They weren't, not even lax. Lax isn't a good enough word. The previous administration was fraudulent, okay? And I think that's what you're going to find also. And
oh, man, I thought he was supposed to talk about Ilhan Omar in that clip. Hold on. Either way, I like that JD just backed up everything I said. Hadn't listened to that clip yet. Okay, well, trust me, Ilhan Omar got called out because she actually responded. Now, she also does not like it when she has the spotlight shown on her. Ilhan Omar was totally used to the idea that she was just going to be able to continue operating in the same fraudulent manner that she had since the moment she came here under an assumed name with a fake age, illegally gaining citizenship. Now, she's lashing out at President Trump, lashing out at people who support him, and spreading falsehoods about the man himself after this comment that was made yesterday in the Oval Office. So, President Trump slams the nation of Somalia. He slams Ilhan Omar, didn't mince words about how he feels about her. He echoed the sentiments of a lot of Americans. After he spoke to J.D. Vance and he said, I hope that this is part of it. Like I said, a lot of people got very excited. I certainly hope that that's going to be something they look into. Now that they're going to have all of these agencies together in one place, speaking about the reality of this situation. Again, this was going on for decades. The problems that President Trump is unraveling did not suddenly begin under the Biden administration. We're talking about administration after administration after administration that at best tolerated the fraud, at worst was complicit in the fraud, benefited from the fraud, allowed themselves and their friends and their donors and their lobbyists to get rich off of the fraud. And President Trump is the only president in modern history, certainly in the 20th or 21st century, to come forward and talk about this and say that things need to change. So she takes the clip of him. Right. Okay, here it is. This is actually the clip right here. Let me go to it. And I will play for you President Trump talking about Omar.
everyone knows they've been cheating for years. It's the first ever. And it's got to be stopped. I mean, it's got to be stopped. Think of it, Somalia is a third world, maybe a fourth world nation. One of the worst, one of the most dangerous. They don't have anything. They don't have councils. They don't have government. They don't have police. They shoot each other all over the place. They come here and they steal $19 billion. That's crazy. And Ilhan Omar, I hope this is part of it, but she married her brother, supposedly. I mean, there's a lot of documentation. That means she's here illegally and she's a congresswoman. And I hope you're going to be looking at that, or somebody is, all right? Because she's one of the ringleaders here. She's bad news, really bad news. She's so bad for our country.
Now, I agree with President Trump. Ilhan Omar is here illegally, but not because she married her brother. She got her brother's citizenship because she was already a citizen. But the illegality of it comes in because she was already married to somebody else. You can't marry your brother, second. And third, she was illegal when she received her citizenship because she lied about her name and she lied about her age. She and her father, her family, they came into the refugee camps from Somalia. It wasn't that they were persecuted politically. It's because they were part of the ruling junta. They were part of the authoritarian military government of Somalia that was overthrown by the Somalian people. That's why they had to leave Somalia. That's why they became immigrants and came to the United States. They gave fake names so that they could cover up the fact that they were actually complicit in war crimes. And Ilhan Omar lied about her age because her father received citizenship, and then as a minor, she would automatically receive citizenship. So that's how she's here illegally. But she also committed a crime by helping her brother to become a citizen of the United States by marrying him and by doing it with the express intention of committing immigration fraud. So she responds and she says, the most disturbing part of this unhinged comments is how comfortable he is in telling the world how stupid he and his followers are. Bitch, don't even. You know that everything he said was in spirit true. Obviously, maybe he got one thing wrong by saying that she received citizenship by marrying her brother. It was just the other way around. Still illegal, still good enough reason to be denaturalized. But I guess it's expected from a man who regularly and publicly fantasized about sleeping with his own daughter. You ignorant slut. He never fantasized about sleeping with his own daughter. That is so disgusting, just a deplorable lie, and is clearly implicated in the worst pedophile cover-up case. And, if I may, the only reason Jeffrey Epstein is currently on the lips of every Democrat politician or any mainstream media journalists after for years, people like myself was screaming from the bell tower about Jeffrey Epstein, his crimes, his international child trafficking ring, and his connections to the rich, powerful banking elite families and modeling agencies all around the world, is because Donald Trump duped these people into believing that there might be something there related to him. Oh, suddenly Donald Trump says, don't talk about Jeffrey Epstein, and everybody wants to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Not because they had any interest in saving children or they had any interest in stopping international child trafficking or the victimization of the most innocent people on planet Earth, because they also perfectly were fine with the child trafficking operation that was taking place under the Biden regime. Hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied migrant children being trafficked across the southern border. No, the only reason they care about it is because they thought that it might be politically expedient for them. And despite that fact, despite Donald Trump being totally vindicated by anything in the Epstein files or by numerous people who were close confidants of Jeffrey Epstein testifying to the fact that Donald Trump never had any inappropriate contact with any children or any adult women, and coming from the mouths of the victims themselves, these people continue to repeat it over and over again. So I would posit that it's actually Ilhan Omar who is projecting her own feelings onto Donald Trump. She's the one who continues to repeat these disgusting lies, thereby admitting to the world that she and her followers are truly the unintelligent ones. So, Ilhan Omar, I hope that you get denaturalized, and I hope that they send you back to Somalia. And I hope that the federal government takes every single penny that you made while here in the United States of America, because you are a multimillionaire now on a salary of $174,000 a year. That's a lot of money, okay? I'm not going to lie. For a lot of people, that would be more than enough. But for somebody like you, jet-setting between Minneapolis and Washington, D.C., suddenly becoming a multimillionaire overnight with zero experience in the stock market or with crypto trading or business ownership, you suddenly become a very wealthy woman. There's obviously a lot more going on here than Ilhan Omar just being a radical left-wing communist in Washington, D.C. She is a total fraud. Take her money. Take everything that she has been able to build, either through legal means or otherwise, while she was here in the United States. All right, now let's move on from Ilhan Omar to a subject that is just secondary to that, and that would be the new report from Nick Shirley. I would also tell you that the age of citizen journalism has given rise to a brand new category of news and information. For years, many people have been independent and citizen journalists. They never received the respect or the attention that they deserved. The stories that they would bring were just brushed to the side. As an example, okay, I was the first person to interview Dominion whistleblower Melissa Carone. All right, after she came forward about everything that she saw at the TCF Center in Detroit. And, it got some attention, but didn't get nearly as much attention as it probably should have. And here, a couple of years later, after the mainstream media has completely destroyed themselves, destroyed any credibility that they might have, independent citizen journalists are now the actual news. They are the ones doing the hard-hitting investigative reporting, and they are forcing governments and bureaucrats to answer to what the American people want them to pay attention to. And fraud is first among them. If it wasn't for Nick Shirley's original report coming out of Minnesota, we may not have even gotten that fraud task force that was put together yesterday in Washington, D.C. in the Oval Office. And now Nick Shirley has gone to California. So in this report, he and his team were able to uncover over $170 million in fraud. He shows that these people have businesses which are essentially non-existent. There are no employees. Sometimes their offices are completely empty. But there does appear to be quite a few owners who have luxury vehicles. He said California's version of Medicaid is called Medi-Cal. And as Dr. Oz had previously said, it has more than doubled since 2022 from $108 billion to a proposed $222 billion in 2026. The population of California, however, it has not grown exponentially. Only their spending has. There's been a 1,000% increase in hospice care in Los Angeles County alone, and it's estimated that the fraud in California could be in the hundreds of billions of dollars. So previously, Nick had visited daycare centers in San Diego. He had gone to Skid Row in Los Angeles to take a look at the homeless industrial complex and the way that they were using illegals in that area to continue getting funding into their programs. Now, in this video, he visited a series of hospice care centers in Los Angeles, as well as another couple of daycare centers in San Diego. Surprise, surprise, the Somali daycare owners and operators that Nick was able to locate and actually get on camera knew exactly who he was. They screamed at him, and they actually called the police and asked for him to leave the property. And all he did was wanted to know if he could enroll baby Joey in those daycare centers, or if they had any children who were on site at the campus in the first place. Now, if you go back to this clip right here, it is the full video of the 40-minute expose that Nick put together, and it's retweeted by U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley. Bill Asaley is the U.S. attorney for this area in Los Angeles that I've told you about on a number of occasions. Since coming in to the U.S. attorney's office, Bill has gone hot and heavy against fraud of a number of different types, from the homeless industrial complex to various types of medical fraud or government perpetration of fraud. And he says, TikTok, we are coming for fraud in California. Yes, there will be more arrests, and you can read about some of the cases we've already charged here. And if you go there, it's a press release from the Department of Justice, and it goes through by year. We can go to 2026, but of course, Bill was there in 2025. Now, you can take a look, and right around 300 appears to be the average of cases that they're filing. 2022, there was 279 cases. 2023, 292. 2024, 329. 2025, 278. And so far in 2026, they've had 45 cases. Now, you can also see that broken down by month. We're not going to do that. I've gone through most of these cases here on the show before, but I just find it particularly notable that Bill Asaley is not only running the U.S. Attorney's Office, but he's also paying attention to the work that Nick Shirley is doing here as well. Now, interesting part of this, a lot of people would ask, how is it that we are seeing so many of these home hospice care centers that are popping up in Los Angeles. If you'll remember, the doctor that I told you about last week, he was living in Las Vegas, but there were a lot of these medical centers that were billing Medicaid in Los Angeles using his Medicaid provider number. The doctor said, I don't bill Medicaid, and I haven't seen any of these patients. So there was clearly fraud that was taking place. Nick was able to meet up with a whistleblower there in California who is somebody working in the medical profession, and she kind of spelled out how it is that people are able to get away with this type of fraud. Now, all they have to do is start a company, and then they get a hold of some Medicaid numbers. Those are available through black market online retailers. And then once they purchase those Medicaid numbers, they just start billing. And apparently, up until this point, nobody was paying attention. Nobody in California. There actually is a single point person who is supposed to be verifying that these businesses are real, or that these clients exist, or that these services are actually being delivered. But apparently, this woman has never bothered to check on anyone, because you've had this explosion in growth. You've had this explosion in expenditures, an explosion in payouts coming from Medi-Cal, and nobody seemed to be curious about it at all. So she said, not only do people make these companies knowing full well that they're just going to be committing fraud, there's actually a cottage industry of training schools that will teach you how to open your own home hospice care center, and then how to do what she is discussing in this video. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this.
The way these hospices are able to enroll these people and collect money from Medicare and Medi-Cal here inside of California is they collect the Medicare numbers from individuals and then sign them up for hospice without them even knowing. I actually went and spoke with a professional inside of the medical industry to get her opinion on how this all works. We're seeing all of these hospices pop up here. Why is hospice and home health care such a booming business right now?
I think it's become a trend of fraud. Honestly has. I heard about this about 5 years ago during COVID, that people were building hospices and selling them. It was like a business these people made. So it's an easy way to build Medicare with their people's beneficiary numbers that people can easily steal and even purchase and buy. They buy numbers from people and tell them, give me your Medicare beneficiary number and I will give you something in return.
And what does that mean, give you my beneficiary number?
So there's an ID that you have. Medicare gives you, Medicare is for anybody 65 and over. So they'll give you a Medicare ID number. And that number is what's used to bill Medicare.
So essentially, if they can get a number from somebody, it's almost like getting a credit card number. And then from there, they can continue to bill and bill and bill and get that Medicare money.
Exactly. It's actually more beneficial than finding a credit card these days. Anybody can get a hospice license, actually. You don't need to be a physician. You don't need to be a doctor. You can apply and get a hospice license in the state of California. They bill, they take the Medicare numbers, they bill Medicare, the Medicare sends them a check right away. It's an easy process.
So an old person might be a bit naive to giving somebody their Medicare number,
Yes.
and without them even knowing, that's more valuable than giving them their credit card number.
Correct.
All right. So with a credit card, banks are not very happy when people's money gets stolen. With a credit card, people's money is protected. If you can prove that there was a fraudulent transaction, the credit card company and the bank, they're going to have to reverse that transaction, and they're going to be the ones who take the hit. And so they will pursue those things aggressively. Unfortunately, in state government, such as the agency that's overseeing these Medi-Cal transactions, or even in the federal government at Medicaid, there may be people who are aware that there are things taking place, but maybe they just don't care enough because it's not their money. Maybe they're lazy. Maybe they're stupid. But now, because we have this executive order for the fraud task force that's been created, there will be interagency communication, and there will be a centralized data clearinghouse to ensure that this information is properly used. Now, here in actually, I thought I had one more clip of Nick Shirley, but apparently I don't have another clip of Nick Shirley. All right, so also in California, James O'Keefe put out, as I said, his own investigative report. This is I believe it's like about a 20-minute thing, but he did a special premiere, which was over 2 hours or something like that. But in this story, it's very similar to the story that we talked about last week or the week before, which was the signature harvesters that were signing up individuals on ballot initiatives in California. They were using homeless people and paying them to sign the names of pre-prescribed voter list information. Now, in this video right here, James O'Keefe finds another place in California where people are being paid cash, cigarettes, and sometimes even drugs to not just sign those petitions and those ballot initiatives, but also to register to vote. Now, once those people are registered to vote, where those ballots go, well, that's probably up to the people that are getting them signed up. And of course, these are NGOs that are funding these organizations and are pushing these initiatives. And very likely they have a vested interest in making sure that that vote is controlled once it has been registered.
Now we're gonna give you $2. We just need 14 signatures.
The petitioner Brenda Brown hands cash money to the homeless person, not only for signing the California ballot initiative, but also as to register to vote.
Now, because you haven't registered, I need to register you so I can get paid too. I'm paying you guys, I need to get paid. Come on.
That is a federal felony. And it didn't just happen once, it happened over and over and over again. We personally witnessed and covertly filmed this happening at least 28 times over the span of our investigation, and that is just in Los Angeles. Many of the homeless have zero understanding of what it is that they're actually signing.
But what is that petition for? You know the petition for?
I do not know.
The petitioners instruct the homeless to enter made-up addresses like Pinocchio Lane.
What do I put as my address?
Yeah, just put you live on Pinocchio Lane.
Oh, you can just take it out.
Oh, good.
And all of this occurring just outside the front doors of shelters and NGOs such as Weingart Center, which have received hundreds of millions of dollars in government money. One Weingart employee tells us when and where to find the illegal cash exchanges for signatures outside, and says the cash being given out is coming from a higher source.
Of course, it's coming from a higher source. These NGOs are using your tax dollars to pervert the system and then to use it against you when the time comes. Now, so we have these two pretty bombshell exposés coming out on the exact same day. And the office of Governor Gavin Newsom has issued an official statement. James O'Keefe says, breaking, Newsom demands prosecutions after O'Keefe undercover video exposes 28 cash for ballot deals in Los Angeles, California. I would be very surprised if Bill Asaley has also not seen this report as well. Now, the person putting out this response is Brandon Richards. He's the deputy director for rapid response. He says this alleged activity is a felony in California. It's also a felony at the federal level. Anyone caught engaging in this activity should be investigated and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Take it a step further. Take it to where the money is coming from. It's not simply the homeless drug addict on the street that's getting paid $2 per signature to have their friend sign up, or getting a bag of fentanyl because they're doing a day's work out in front of the homeless shelter. It has to extend to the organizations that are organizing and funding these efforts, because that's where the money is. The money must stop flowing into the hands of people who are going to be abusing it. This is chump change. These people absolutely have no care for the well-being of those that they are telling to go out and collect these signatures. I would seriously doubt it that any of these people collecting signatures out there in front of the homeless shelter are even aware that this might be a crime, either at the state or the federal level, because they've been told by their bosses to go out and behave in this way. So they probably are just out there thinking they're doing their job. And at the end of the day, they're probably just going to get a bag of drugs, and that's the only thing that they care about. Now, if we top over to Minnesota, there are a series of 7 individuals who have just pled guilty to another series of fraud cases in that state. You've got a group of people who stole at least $12 million, and every single one of them appears to be Muslim, most likely Somali. Ikram Yusuf Mohammed, Suleiman Yusuf Mohammed, Aisha Hassan Hussein, Sahara Sharif Osman, Shakura Abdinur Abdesalam, Fadumo Mohammed Yusuf, Gandhi Yusuf Mohammed. Let's go ahead and take a look.
This week, all but one of the next batch of fraud suspects in the Feeding Our Future case say they will plead guilty. This group of 7 was led by Ikram Mohammed, one of the most notorious defendants in the entire $300 million Feeding Our Future fraud case. She allegedly recruited her husband, her mother, her sister, and 2 of her brothers to all take part in the fraud. In the trial of Amy Bach, the former executive director of Feeding Our Future, we learned that she was very close with Ikram, who worked at Feeding Our Future in addition to running meal sites and allegedly collecting kickbacks from many other participants. Bach texted her about slapping defamation lawsuits on state officials who began to suspect fraud. According to Ikram Mohammed's indictment, her group is accused of stealing at least $12 million. They were all set to go on trial together in late April, but after this week, it looks like only one defendant, Mohammed's brother Gandhi, will be left. The guilty pleas are scheduled for Wednesday and Friday, and I'll let you know how those hearings go. I'm Lou Ragu.
So Gandhi is probably going to want to just plead guilty as well. After all of his co-conspirators plead guilty, they will all be forced by the Department of Justice to make statements of their guilt, discussing in detail exactly how their co-conspirators operated within this fraudulent scheme right along with them. So Gandhi is going to have a very difficult time defending that in court. Now, I do have a couple of super chats, Rumble rants over here that I need to read. Will to push forward. He says, Zach, if anything is to be assumed, with the convoluted things going on with Iran, the fraud, laundering, taking jobs away from Americans to foreigners, the jabs, insurance, replacing the population, very convoluted. It certainly is. I mean, this is also another aspect of why fixing America is such a huge job and why I see President Trump pushing out into all of these different areas and making real substantive efforts to unravel these problems that have been plaguing America for decades upon decades. This is not something that can happen overnight. And just because you're not seeing President Trump declare that the military go out onto the streets and arrest every single person who you suspect of being an evil man, it doesn't mean that something isn't taking place. I mean, we live in the United States of America, and we have a system, albeit imperfect, that operates in a certain manner. And all we can do is operate within the confines of that system that was set up by our forefathers and then gradually perverted over the course of our lives and our forefathers' lives by those that came after our forefathers, be it Congress or the judiciary or lawyers or bankers, I mean, whomever. There is so much shit to unravel. I mean, just imagine taking a big, long dog turd and trying to tie it into a knot and keep it in one piece. It's not going to happen. It's going to be very difficult. Now, let me say thank you to Patrick D35, who apparently doesn't care for Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi needs to be fired so she can get her own show on Fox News. She might as well be a Democrat, keeping Trump from fulfilling his promise of draining the swamp. I don't necessarily know that that is accurate, but you know, you're entitled to your opinion. And I go back to what I've said before. Pam Bondi is not the one who's directly making decisions about, you know, who is going to be indicted. There is a hierarchy at the Department of Justice. It's the same with the FBI. You know, Kash Patel is the director of the FBI. Pam Bondi is the Attorney General of the United States. But there is a pyramid, an executive structure of people that operate within different departments and operate all around the country within that Department of Justice or within the FBI. And one of the major problems that we have is the fact that the Senate has not confirmed U.S. attorneys in many of the most critical areas around the country. Without those U.S. attorneys running those offices, it's nearly impossible to even have cases brought. In the instance of Lindsay Halligan was appointed as interim because the Senate had ultimately refused to even bring her forward for consideration to be confirmed. And that appointment was valid. there is legal history and precedent. It states directly that if there is no U.S. attorney that's being confirmed, the Department of Justice's head, which is the Attorney General, has the privilege of appointing an interim U.S. attorney. There's nothing ever that's been written that says that interim U.S. attorney doesn't have all of the power and responsibility of a U.S. attorney that's being confirmed by the Senate. However, the various NGOs and left-wing law organizations around the country that have consistently brought these cases against these interim picks or people that they claim have not been properly appointed, and then those cases go before a political left-wing justice who does not care for President Trump. I mean, we've got two things stacked against us. So I would suggest that Pam Bondi isn't the problem. The problem is that the judicial system is corrupted because we have all of these NGOs that have far too much power and money because they've taken it from people like us. And so therefore they have all of this brain trust of people that have been anticipating how they're going to fight back. And then they've got judges that are essentially allowing them to do that without any care for the rule of law. So, there's only so much that can be done. But I appreciate the donation, Patrick. Also, it's Tony Man says, hi, Zach and Lisa. All went well with the surgeries. Good stuff, brother. I'm glad to hear it. I'm up and moving around pretty good. Pain levels are up as I chose to go without go without opioids. Good for you, brother. Thanks for your support. Hopefully, they gave you some, I know that Toradol tends to work pretty well, which is a non-opiate pain reliever. I've recently seen a commercial for a non-opiate pain reliever that they say is supposed to be good for surgeries and for like bone breaks and stuff. So anyways, maybe talk to your doctor, see if there's anything else out there. All right, so let's go. Let me say thank you to Filter Dog 1. Nick Shirley uncovers fraud in California. Newsom attacks Shirley. Yes, Gavin Newsom, although he responded to James O'Keefe, he responded to Nick Shirley with a meme about Nick Shirley making fun of him, which I thought was pretty stunning. I actually did mean to bring that up. Let me go to Nick Shirley's account here. Let's go to his replies. Okay. Also, Nick has a new website, the Anti-Fraud Club or something like that. Okay, where is it? Oh, that's good. I like that one. Here it is. Nick Shirley right now, Governor Newsom press office, and it's a picture of a guy looking kind of sickly with a bunch of cameras all over his body, and he says, "Hey, can I see your kids?" And so his other account is the Anti-Fraud Club _ All this does is two things for Newsom. Number one, it makes people realize how pathetic their governor is, and it shows that he would rather defend fraud than condemn it. Number two, it makes a small percentage of his base think Nick Shirley is truly evil, which puts his life in danger. Classless act by a governor. It certainly is. And Nick Shirley also stated in his video that his cost to hire private security has increased exponentially. He said for 3 days in California just to film this video, it took him about, I think, over $10,000 that he had to pay. However, Nick seems to be doing well. He's got a lot of people supporting him. It looks like he's monetized on X, and of course, he's also monetized on YouTube. I think he's probably got like a Patreon and stuff like that. So Nick is doing well, and I think that he ultimately is going to be safe at the end of the day. No thanks, Joe says, hey, Lisa and Zach, happy Tuesday, and thanks for your hard work. God bless, and stay safe. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Jenna Sepe, good to see you, Jen, says, hug, Zach, appreciate you. Ina says, thanks, RP, appreciate you. And Delia says, Omar is here legally. She married her brother to bring him here in a fraudulent manner after she was already a U.S. citizen, not the reverse. Yes, which is why I mentioned it. However, I'm sure you heard everything I said earlier, so I still think there is an argument to be made for her being illegally here now because she committed crimes which led to her naturalization. And after you are naturalized, if you have committed crimes which, were lies of omission or intent to the federal government, which led to you being naturalized, then you can be denaturalized for that. Okay, now we talked about that. Let's go to New York now. This is a staggering figure right here. You talking about the homeless industrial complex. You take a look at how much the city of New York has spent on homeless people, and if they would have just given that money to every homeless person, there would be no homeless people in the city of New York. Apparently, in total, last year, they spent $81,000 per person on every homeless individual in the city of New York. And most of them are just living out on the street. So this is coming from the comptroller of New York City, spending $81,000 a person in homeless services last year. So obviously the question is, why is anybody homeless in New York? If it's costing $81,000 by the city of New York to keep them living out on the streets and basically freezing their asses off, why wouldn't they just use that $81,000 to put these people up or give them the opportunity to live? How how many buildings the city of New York owns? How many places it's possible that they could live? Obviously, that stuff is being left vacant for a reason. They want to continue to perpetuate the system of homelessness in New York City and in plenty of other places. Although they may have spent $81,000 per person, and it does not mean that $81,000 went to benefit each and every one of those people. So spending that $81,000 per person, that's, of course, on the books. That's a whopping $368 million in total bills. That's a pretty shocking statistic. So spending on the city's Department of Homeless Services Street Homeless Solutions Division more than tripled in the last 6 years. It used to be $102 million, which is still a lot, in 2019. That, at that time, was about $28,000 per, they call them unsheltered homeless persons, according to the report that came from the state comptroller's office. Now, the cost per person was roughly equivalent to the city's median household income as of the 2024 U.S. Census, $81,228. Unsheltered homeless people constitute those living regularly on the streets compared to those who are in some kind of an affordable housing or long-term shelter system. So New York's unsheltered homeless population also, interestingly enough, increased by 26% over that same time frame. About 3,588 unsheltered homeless people were reported in the 2019 fiscal year. 4,505 were reported in the 2025 fiscal year. Now, obviously, one of the problems with being homeless in American cities is that there's way too many people who are making money supposedly trying to solve the problem of getting these people off the street. But nobody ever seems to get off the street. And the only thing that seems to happen is that more and more money continues to be spent. Adam Carolla recently talked about this. He obviously lives in Los Angeles. He said the problem has not gotten any better. Yesterday, I told you about that $10 million hotel that the city handed off to an NGO several years ago, along with another $20 million in funds to renovate the hotel. Of course, a lot of it is yet to be done. They continue to say, oh, it's just going to be another couple of months, and then we'll get it open. And then, of course, after they've spent $20 million on a facility to house 32 people, I mean, good Lord, that is so much money. And of course, once people get in there, I guarantee you, it's not going to be a nice place to live. And it's probably going to be trashed after a couple of months of having people who are used to living, eating, sleeping, and shitting on the sidewalks go in there and live. It's simply not tenable to just take people and force them into a situation like that. There's a lot of issues that lead to somebody being homeless. Mental health, obviously, is going to be one of those big things about it. Drug abuse, alcohol abuse, that's going to be another major aspect of it. There are plenty of people out there who are homeless because they like being homeless. They don't want to deal with all of the shit that comes along with having the responsibilities of owning a home or even having an apartment or having to answer to people. And the people who are single-minded about making sure they have enough fentanyl to keep themselves high throughout the day, they're going to be willing to do or say just about anything. And whether you're sleeping under a bush or you're sleeping in a box or you're sleeping at the park, if you're high on fentanyl, you're probably not going to notice much of a difference. Let's go ahead and hear this clip very quickly from Adam Carolla talking about the homelessness problem in L.A. because, as you know, it's not gotten any better.
Homelessness is a massive problem in LA. It's fueled by drug addicts. I defy you to find somebody who's sleeping outdoors on a fucking sidewalk with roaches and rats on a piece of cardboard that's not high, drunk, intoxicated, whatever. People do a thing where they go, a small percentage of them are just moms that are down on their... I think that number's zero. I've never seen it. I've traveled thousands of miles through this city. So have you. So has Dawson. I've never seen a sober mom walking around with her kids. It's all f***ing junkies.
It's an excellent point. I can't tell you that I've ever seen anything like that either. Generally speaking, when you're a parent, if you're in a situation that requires you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're going to go ahead and do that. There's going to be things that you are willing to do to ensure that you and your kids are not going to be living out on the street. And believe me, the California Department of Children and Family Services, they're going to be more than happy to swoop in and take those kids out of the hand of that homeless mother if they are living out on the street. There is obviously a problem with drugs, mental illness, but even more importantly, there is a problem with people getting fantastically wealthy, skimming the system, and perpetuating it to ensure that the federal dollars keep flowing into their bank accounts, never once having any desire to get people off the streets or to give them a better life or to put them into a situation where they don't have to live out in the middle of the elements and shoot up on the sidewalk. This is going to continue as long as the money keeps flowing. Now, today is a notable day, because the Save America Act was finally brought to the House floor, to the Senate floor, and they were able to achieve a simple majority to advance it to the point where senators have begun to debate about it. I believe Republicans are going first, and there's a number of clips of them essentially just talking about why it's important and why it needs to get passed. Now, President Trump, prior to this morning's series of initial votes, he put out this post on Truth Social, and he wanted to let everybody know that not only was he not going to sign any bills until the Save America Act passes, but he's also not going to be endorsing any candidates until the Save America Act passes. He said the Save America Act is one of the most important and consequential pieces of legislation in the history of Congress and America itself. No more rigged elections, voter ID, proof of citizenship, no rigged mail-in voting. We are the only country in the world that allows this. No more men and women's sports, no transgender mutilization of our children, 90 to 99% issues on all. Only sick, demented, or deranged people in the House or Senate could vote against the Save America Act. And if they do, each one of these points separately will be used against the user in his or her political campaign for office. A guaranteed loss. Get your senators, Republican or Democrat, to vote yes on the Save America Act. I will never, ever endorse anyone who votes against the Save America Act. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. What's fascinating about that vote I just mentioned is that even Susan Collins and Mitch McConnell voted to advance the Save America Act so that the Senate could begin debating on it. Now, here is based Mike Lee.
It's been about 2 years since Chip Roy and I wrote the SAVE Act, which later became the Save America Act. Tomorrow, this is going to come to fruition as the Save America Act comes to the floor of the United States Senate. I invite all within the sound of my voice who would like this bill to become law to reach out to as many people as possible, friends, and especially United States senators who might listen to you. Ask them, please get this passed. Tell them we need to invoke the talking filibuster in the United States Senate. No zombie filibuster will suffice on this one. We've got to turn to this bill, we've got to debate it, and we've got to stay on the bill until it becomes law. There can be no surrender, there can be no ifs, ands, or buts, there can be no cheap imitations here. The Republic is on the line. Let's get this done.
Jess, I see that you're pulling your kids out of public school and you're going to homeschool them. I think that's awesome. I don't know if you're down here in Florida or if you and your husband are even potentially looking to move, but I can tell you that down here in Florida, the state government will give homeschooling parents something like $7,500 per year for the cost of education for each child. My neighbors have 5 kids that they homeschool, every single one of them, and they get that money. And obviously, that money is used for lesson plans, for their school supplies, for everything that they need to do. They're great. The kids are awesome. They're very well adjusted. They're super. They're kids of faith. They're just awesome kids. And my neighbor's JD. Yeah, anyways, they're great. They're great people. So hopefully you guys have something like that in your state as well. Okay. Now, yeah, we don't have too many Somalians down here, Skank Hunt. There's like 51 total, I think, if that. All right. Now, as I was saying, the Save America vote did advance by a vote of 51 to 48. That means that we now have a simple majority. And as long as we have the filibuster, the talking filibuster going, they're probably going to get to a point where they're going to be forced to do a simple majority vote, which means that they may have J.D. Vance throw his hat in the ring if by some reason it does go back to a tie. And this is really the next step that we needed to advance this to the point where it becomes law. Now, next, we finally got our first report coming from the good folks over at Just the News. And the situation is as we had thought. Essentially, China had hacked into the U.S. Voting registration system and gained access to the voter rolls for a number of different states. Now, they used that information for a number of different things, but ultimately it was to try to influence the U.S. election. Surter says, I think these people should look for the working homeless who don't sit around all day like the dope heads do. I was one of those. I'm not saying drugs aren't part of the problem. No, you're absolutely right. But the problem is that the working homeless are the ones who are not sitting around waiting for the free services all day. And unfortunately, they probably just continue to slip through the cracks as they are attempting to get themselves back up on their feet. That's where the money should be going. I absolutely agree with you. The people who want to get themselves out of that situation are the people who should be first in line to get the help. But unfortunately, as we've established, this is not about helping people. This is about people getting rich off of the backs of the homeless. Oh, Jess, you're in Pennsylvania, but I refuse to let my kids be subjected to public school anymore. Luckily, they are all Christ followers and patriots. I love to hear it, and I would expect nothing less. Thank you for being here. All right, so the U.S. had expressed outrage when Great Britain had revealed 2 years ago that their voter registration databases were also hacked by the Chinese. That kind of became a global scandal. But the only problem is that while that scandal was breaking, U.S. intelligence had knowledge that the same thing had happened here since 2020. Beijing back then had hacked into the U.S. voter registration data. Of course, there was a report that came out at the tail end of President Trump's first administration that was put together by D&I Ratcliffe during his final days in that role. But the information is coming from a document that was given to Just the News, and it says redacted Chinese intelligence officials analyzed multiple U.S. states' redacted election voter registration data, redacted to conduct public opinion analysis on the 2020 U.S. general election. That was a once highly classified April 2020 National Intelligence Council memo that was entitled Cyber Operations Enabling Expansive Authoritarianism. Now, we'll take a look at the document itself in just a moment, but the memo, of course, seems to be heavily redacted. It's been quietly declassified. It's not declassified by the Trump administration. It was declassified by the Biden administration 2 years after it was written, and it basically just wasn't announced. So that means now 6 years later, the U.S. intelligence community still has not fully informed the American people. They haven't even informed Congress about the breadth of the evidence they possess to show that China had done this. Now, of course, when we say China, that's a big concept. It's not like every single person in the Chinese government. Doesn't even mean that Xi Jinping knew about it. You have siloed and compartmentalized organizations within the larger nation of China, just in the exact same way you do here in the United States. But Beijing or some elements of the Chinese government got that data, and we don't know what operations the U.S. government has taken to secure the U.S. election system in that time. I would suggest probably damn near nothing at all. But the gap in public knowledge is particularly politically sensitive, as this week we are now finally taking up this election security bill, which is a top priority for President Trump and a top priority for many people across the political spectrum here in the United States. And it's been said to Just the News that National Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and former DNI and current CIA Director John Ratcliffe are currently working to declassify a series of potentially explosive documents, a tranche of documents that will show exactly what China did and who in the U.S. government knew about it, and more importantly, who covered it up. So the secrecy surrounding China's access to voter registration has been so persistent that even Republican National Committee Chairman Joe Gruters, who is President Trump's point man for the 2026 midterms, said he was unaware of the intelligence. Now, I'd also like to take you back a couple of years to a story that I covered pretty extensively here on the program, a story about a man named Eugene Yu and his company, which was called Connect, which was based in Michigan, not far from the capital city of Lansing. And Eugene Yu ended up being charged initially once the evidence came out that his company, which was contracted to handle voter data, was actually funneling that data back to China. I don't know if this particular story is talking about Eugene Yu and Connect, or if this is a different type of breach that took place. But if you remember, Eugene Yu basically was allowed to flee the country, and he's never had to answer for his crimes. But he was most certainly a spy that was working here in the United States to get this type of U.S. election data and harvest it, sending it straight back to China. So what's crazy is the fact that China has access to these voter rolls, but we don't, Gruters told John Solomon Reports when he spoke with him last Tuesday. Current and former U.S. officials have told Just the News that U.S. intelligence agencies possess several raw reports dating to the spring of 2020, which show that China gained access to American voter registration data spanning several states, as well as a few finished intelligence products referring to such breaches, including at least one presidential daily briefing. What's scary about this is that it appears to have been recognized prior to the election of 2020. We knew at that time that Joe Biden had very direct financial relationships with China. And of course, that was a major concern for a lot of people who were worried about the election being stolen. Ultimately, it was, and the people in President Trump's first administration did nothing, apparently, to inform him other than giving him some form of this intelligence in a presidential daily briefing. But the single passage in the DNI document that's being declassified by the Biden administration is the only piece of evidence that we currently have in the public sphere. I would suggest John Solomon has probably been given additional information behind the scenes, but of course he can't publish what is still classified data. Now, obviously, voter registration data, it's not the same thing as ballots, but Americans choose their candidates on ballots, and the way that Americans get on the list to be able to vote is by registering to vote. It does contain sensitive, personally identifying information. It can have your driver's license number. It can have your entire or partial social security number. The data is considered so sensitive that there are a number of Democrat states that are currently right now suing the Trump administration to stop the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security from obtaining it from them. And they are currently also giving it to liberal groups who claim that it's the holy grail of election integrity. If this information is put into the hands of foreign powers, then such data could be used to mimic social personas that would be designed to influence elections or make absentee ballot requests so then fake votes can be cast. This is something that the FBI has previously gone on record as stating that China might have been doing during the 2020 election, again, due to recently declassified documents. It would appear that the CIA had previously blocked efforts to inform President Trump, stopped many of these reports from even being made available to Congress. There's as much evidence of China's access to U.S. voter registration files as what eventually prompted outcry in Britain, an intelligence official who worked for Biden and declined to be named by Just the News. That former intelligence official said it was known certainly by February of 2020 when there was a White House briefing, a loud enough briefing that by April of 2020, it was included in the cyber hacking report. It's quite remarkable that it's been kept a secret for this long. One of the intelligence officials who worked on that China cyber hacking portfolio under President Trump and tried to raise the alarm as a whistleblower only to be blocked by colleagues in various spy agencies also confirmed the evidence of Beijing obtaining voter information is solid and extensive. We knew by April 2020 that Chinese intelligence had voter registration data from multiple states and was analyzing it with an eye towards the 2020 election. This is former NIC officer Christopher Porter speaking. But the CIA blocked efforts to inform President Trump and later stopped many of these reports from being made available to Congress. Now, during the Biden administration, when I raised concern about the legal requirement to share these and other reports with congressional oversight, they changed my job to exclude me from elections, and then they fired me. Now, Tulsi Gabbard's team at DNI was also briefed on China's access to the voter registration data, and she is currently working to declassify raw reports for potential public dissemination. Officials with the CIA also spoke with Just the News, and they said they are also working on answers to questions that have been submitted by the news organization, including the number of states that might be impacted, whether any states were even informed about this. Ratcliffe also, as I stated earlier, he's uniquely versed on this issue. He also wrote a report at the tail end of the 2020 election. As President Trump's then director of national intelligence, he actually sided with Porter and suggested that China was more involved in trying to influence the election than U.S. spy agencies were willing to admit. If you go back and look at the 4 years of the first Trump administration, I mean, how many times did you see in the mainstream media the battle cry of Russia meddling in U.S. elections? Well, here there is direct evidence of China meddling in U.S. elections. And of course, nobody chose to say anything about it. They just wanted to keep it silent. But Director Ratcliffe was among the first to raise alarms about China's efforts to influence that election in 2020. While he was serving as DNI, he publicly held the intelligence community accountable following the foreign threats to the 2020 U.S. elections ICA. He cited a number of inconsistencies, a couple of violations of analytic tradecraft standards, and an assessment that failed to fully reflect the scope of China's election influence activities relative to Russia's. That is a quote from CIA Director of Public Affairs Liz Lyons. At CIA, Director Ratcliffe is committed to ensuring intelligence assessments are produced and evaluated objectively and in accordance with rigorous analytic tradecraft standards. The integrity of our elections is critical to our republic, and Director Ratcliffe has made clear that America's adversaries will be exposed and held accountable for any attempt to undermine it. Now, the revelation of Chinese access to U.S. voter data comes as senators right now are debating the Save America Act, and this is a number one priority. Although these efforts in the Save America Act may safeguard certain aspects of our election, it does nothing to address the problem that we talk about here in this article. But several senators have privately spoken with Just the News and said they were never told about any Chinese effort to access voter registration data, despite the fact there is ample intelligence of China's access to voter data. But for some reason, there's internal disagreements about their intentions. I don't care about their intentions. The very fact that it's happening is concerning enough to show that our election system is completely insecure. And as I have said on many occasions, it backs up the argument that they're totally fake and effing gay. U.S. intelligence officials have acknowledged that at least two other foreign powers have breached American voter data, Russia and Iran. Now, Iran had hackers download 100,000 voter profiles from one state in 2020, according to an unsealed indictment. The dangers of such hacking were laid bare in the intelligence agency's assessment of those two breaches, but for some reason, they never mentioned China. This data can be used by foreign actors to communicate false information to registered voters. At the time, DNI Ratcliffe said that. Now, as the CIA director, he harkens back to that time when he spoke about it in October 2020 during a briefing that also mentioned Iran and Russia's access to this data. But again, China was not mentioned in that briefing. Ratcliffe would later be briefed about China's efforts to obtain the voter data when he wrote his dissent. It's likely that the information at that time had been kept from John Ratcliffe, and it was only later, too late, that it came to his attention and he was able to raise the alarm bells. Now, current and former officials have also told Just the News that the evidence of China accessing and analyzing voter registration data is not minimal. It's voluminous. It's concrete. But the intelligence community's assessment of those intentions that Beijing has for that data and the utilization of that data for malign influence is a matter of dispute. Regardless of whether or not we've seen any specific use of it yet, the very fact that the information has been intercepted and personal identifiable information of American citizens has made its way to a foreign government, every single one of those people deserves to know that their information is no longer safe, that perhaps something could happen with them. I mean, think about how important just raw data is in every single person's lives. How many calls you guys get, how many calls I get every single day from scam numbers, how many attempts I have to access my email or access my social media accounts or to perhaps access my bank account. I've had people call me and tell me they were from my bank and that I've had recent large charges and they need to verify information about my account. I love effing with them. I love screwing around with them when they do call. Or when I have scammers from India calling and telling me that, oh my gosh, you just got a charge on your Amazon bill for 2 iPhone 17 Pros. And I know that that didn't happen, but I like to play along and make their lives a living hell. Because if I'm wasting their time, then they're not going to be able to scam anybody else. But as the declassified April 2020 report had previously suggested, the agencies in their official assessment believed that China stuck to mere analysis of the voter data and took no overt actions to interfere. So officially, the U.S. intelligence community has declared that China put itself in a position to exert malign influence in elections, but did not act on that capability in the 2020 election. How do we know? How do we know they didn't act on it? You know, little old Iran was able to set up a number of psychological operations, sending out emails suggesting that there was going to be a Proud Boys event or there was going to be a left-wing anti-Trump event. And they got that information to send it out to people because of their voter information data. How do we know that people are not being targeted on social media? I mean, you go on X. You go on X. And there are literally millions of accounts just like spewing bullshit. It would be perfectly reasonable to assume that sometimes your feed is going to be targeted with information that may be designed to confuse you or may be designed to influence you in some way. And ultimately, as I said before, just stating that it's China doesn't mean anything at all. China is a huge country. And they have a big government. You have multiple agencies within that government. And you even have factions within the Chinese government that are vying for power against each other. So, you know, I've said this on so many different occasions. I think that President Trump, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin together are working to take down the global criminal cabal at the end of the day. However, you still have individual benefits and goals that each of those world leaders are trying to exert on the rest of the world to get whatever is best for their own citizens. What you have is a number of different countries that will operate independently most of the time, but then interdependently when their goals align. And if the criminal cabal is taken down, then that's good for everybody. But at the end of the day, every country still wants to make sure that their citizens are taken care of first and foremost. And manipulating an election, making sure that a soft on crime leader comes to power, such as we had with Joe Biden, who was directly compromised by elements of the Chinese government, directly financially benefiting from illicit business relationships. Somebody who more than likely, if they had come to know the information we're talking about today, would have chosen to do nothing about it at all. And I think that may be exactly what happened. But the conclusion of ultimately what the Chinese did is disputed by at least 3 different intelligence officials, all led by Porter. They wrote a dissenting report suggesting there actually was some evidence that China did meddle in the 2020 election, and the split began emerging in the summer of 2020. Now, neither side of the intelligence community believes that China took actions that changed votes on machines, even though there is evidence to show that the electronic voting machines could very easily be hacked by a foreign actor. And we also know that China directly programs in hardware and software backdoors to components that are ended up as an integral part of those machines. However, the revelation that the United States was aware that China gained access to voter registration data, just like Great Britain admitted to in 2024, could directly impact the debate in Washington and raise a lot of questions about the political tainting of spy agencies. As you all know, these spy agencies are not benign. They are not working necessarily for the best benefit of the American citizens. Oftentimes, they have become their own little fiefdoms, and they're working to ensure the survival of their own agencies. They want to avoid any scandal. They have their own grifts. They have their own fraudulent activities that are taking place. And then, of course, you have the individual people that are working there who may be narcissistic psychopaths, or they may just be greedy criminals. Now, the FBI has raised concerns about China. We have reported on it here in the past, that plot to organize fake mail-in ballots. That was for the benefit of Joe Biden back in 2020. Now, last June, FBI Director Kash Patel turned over to Congress a long-hidden intelligence report, also from 2020, which raised a lot of questions about whether or not China had plans to mass-produce fake U.S. driver's licenses to carry out a scheme to swing the election for Joe Biden using fake mail-in ballots. I reported years ago on a number of different videos that had been released by whistleblowers as well. There was a Chinese printing press factory that was printing identical mail-in ballots, and it was all caught on video. They were talking about the different states and the differences and making sure that these ballots looked and performed exactly as the actual ballots would look and perform. But the FBI information report has been sent as an uncorroborated advisory to U.S. intelligence agencies. That went out on August 24th of 2020. But then for some reason, they suddenly recalled it in September of 2020. That was the day after then FBI Director Christopher Wray testified to Congress he had not seen any large-scale voter fraud efforts. Of course, that report had to be recalled because that would have made him a liar. The raw and unverified intelligence report was bluntly titled Chinese Government Production and Export of Fraudulent U.S. Driver's Licenses to Chinese Sympathizers in the United States in order to create tens of thousands of fraudulent mail-in votes for U.S. presidential candidate Joe Biden. That's a mouthful. That's a hell of a title right there. And the title of that intelligence report alone indicates that Christopher Wray knew he was lying. Otherwise, he would not have recalled it. It would have been very easy for him to just come forward and say, oh, yeah, that answer I gave yesterday, I guess I didn't know about this very damning and timely intelligence product, or the investigations which led to the seizure of boxes of thousands of fake driver's licenses that were going to be given to Chinese nationals residing here in the United States, with which they would be able to register to vote and then request mail-in ballots, and then, of course, cast a ballot for the candidate of their choice, which was Joseph Robinette Biden at that time. Now, the report was very quickly recalled. Spy agencies were told to delete the information before they had a chance to properly investigate the claims. U.S. Customs and Border Protection had said in July 2020 that fraudulent driver's licenses continue to be found by CBP officers at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. From January through June of 2020, CBP said their officers had seized 1,513 shipments with fraudulent documents. It was a total of 19,888 counterfeit U.S. driver's licenses, and that the majority of these shipments were arriving from China and Hong Kong. Now, why this is notable is because 19,000, nearly 20,000 fraudulent driver's licenses that were intercepted would seemingly indicate there were many, 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 many more that were never intercepted. When people engage in criminal activity such as this, like drug dealers sending drugs through various types of shipping services, sending contraband animals, sending anything illegal, they understand that a certain percentage of them are ultimately going to be intercepted. And they send enough to offset for that because they can't catch every single one of them. They know that some of them will be found, but they're going to send even more because that way they'll still be able to accomplish their goals. Either they'll get enough drugs through and they'll make their money back on the street. They'll get their contraband animals through, turtles, tortoises, exotics. They'll get enough of those through, and then they'll be able to sell them. The ones that are caught, those are going to end up going to, say, I don't know, like a rescue mission or something like that. And then the same with these driver's licenses. They were able to intercept 20,000 of them. That means that likely there are millions that made its way through. Now, the CBP and the press release did not directly link these fraudulent licenses to potential voter fraud efforts. But I'll be a monkey's uncle if I don't believe that that's exactly what they were going to be used for. How are you going to be able to directly connect it to voter fraud efforts unless you catch people in the action of doing it? The only way to make sure or to determine if that was the ultimate goal would be to seal up one of those packages that you know contain thousands of fraudulent driver's licenses in there, allow it to be delivered, and then you would have to stake out the home or the office, wherever it was that these things went, and then you would have to make sure that you know exactly where all those driver's licenses are going. And then, of course, that is going to take a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of investigative man hours, and again, people are ultimately lazy. They don't think that this is a big deal, or they know it's a big deal and they don't care because they want it to happen. They wanted Joe Biden to be crowned the victor. Now, there's also open source intelligence, which shows that there are ties and actions by Chinese intelligence because they wanted Joe Biden to win. And a report that was also reviewed by Just the News showing that the Chinese government linked cyber hackers and Chinese social media troll farms. They were using them to take action and aim at U.S. presidential election supporters back in 2020. They wanted to swing it against President Trump in favor of Joe Biden. There are strong indicators that Chinese intelligence and other law enforcement agencies, including their Ministry of Security and their Ministry of Public Security, also played a detailed role. So the long-running and Chinese state-sponsored operation called Spamouflage Dragon and Dragon Bridge was a organization or an op with online influencers using campaigns that were conducted around the world. It was all aimed at Trump administration policies and President Trump himself during that 2020 election. And they have been repeatedly tied to Chinese law enforcement and Chinese MPS, including their 912 Special Working Group. And the DOJ has also argued in court filings that members of MSP's 912 Special Project Working Group had coordinated with officials in China's United Front Work Department back in 2020 on topics related to COVID-19, the pandemic, the U.S. government's response to Hong Kong protests, the George Floyd riots. That was another big one they capitalized on. And, of course, the 2020 presidential election. Other cybersecurity researchers had also labeled a variety of Chinese cyber actors as being advanced persistent threat groups, APT groups, and a number of those have engaged in election influence efforts over the past decade. A number of them have also engaged in attempting to meddle in the U.S. elections, not only in 2020, but previously, as well as elections in the UK, Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Cambodia, and other places. So the DOJ said APT-31 was part of a cyber espionage program that was run by the Chinese MSS through the Hubei State Security Department, while the State Department had declared that APT-31 was a collection of Chinese state-sponsored intelligence officers, contract hackers, and support staff, or in other words, a prolific Chinese cyber threat group. So CISA and the FBI assessed that the tactics, techniques, and procedures of APT-40 cyber actors were associated with China's MSS and China's Hainan State Security Department in particular. The Mandiant cybersecurity firm found that APT-41 was a prolific Chinese cyber threat group that carries out state-sponsored espionage activity. And the DOJ also later said that an indicted member of APT-41 had boasted openly about his connections to the Chinese MSS. The DOJ also revealed in a number of indictments in recent years, after 2020, China's MPS and MSS had seemingly taken aim at U.S. politics during that election season. Mandiant also said in March of 2020 that beginning this year, FireEye observed Chinese actor APT-41 carry out one of the broadest campaigns by a Chinese cyber espionage actor we had observed in recent years. Now, a later assessment by the same firm in 2024 cited that same report from 2020 and said that APT-41 conducted large-scale vulnerability exploitation and scanning activity that compromised U.S. government organizations ahead of the 2020 U.S. election cycle. And the ODNI's National Intelligence Council wrote its aforementioned bombshell assessment in April of 2020, with it not being declassified until then DNI Avril Haines did so in October of 2022. That was titled Cyber Operations Enabling Expansive Digital Authoritarianism. China and other authoritarian governments are using cyber espionage, attacks, and influence operations to extend the coercive reach of their ideological enforcement and political control efforts beyond their borders. And in some cases, they are impinging on Western democracies' sovereignty and interests to enhance their domestic stability. That was what the ODNI found in early 2020. Now, what was stated there should not surprise anybody. Again, every single nation on Earth with the capabilities to engage in this type of behavior should be expected that they are going to, whether they are friend or foe or otherwise. They are only looking to uphold their own goals and to ensure the success and stability of their own nation, their own government, their own people. And it oftentimes will be to the detriment and against the better interests of many nations that they are publicly very friendly with. Now, China and, the ODNI made it very clear by early 2020, they knew Chinese intelligence officials had analyzed the voter registration data for a number of U.S. states, and they had apparently used that information to carry out an analysis on U.S. public opinion related to the race between Trump and Biden. Graphica, another organization, publicly released a report in April 2020 that was entitled Return of the Spamouflage Dragon Pro-Chinese Spam Network Tries Again. That report said one of the accounts in Spamouflage shifted its focus in late January to start talking about the coronavirus. And in March, as the Chinese government's narrative shifted to arguing that China had responded better than the United States, it tweeted about the reported wave of xenophobic attacks on Chinese Americans linked to the outbreak. Basically, the same thing that the mainstream media was saying here in the United States. They wrote that in late January and early February, the network also expressed confidence in China's ability to handle the virus. By March, the tone had changed. It proclaimed that China's victory in the war against the epidemic, praising China's status as a role model for other countries, and contrasted China's, quote, victory with the struggles of Western countries, especially the United States. So the Google Threat Analysis Group also wrote a report in 2020, which said that in April, that group terminated 186 YouTube channels as part of our ongoing investigation into coordinated influence operations linked to China. Google had said that in May of 2020, we terminated 1,098 YouTube channels as part of that inquiry into coordinated influence operations linked to China. And the Chinese influence efforts there included criticizing the U.S. and COVID-19. They also added that in June of 2020, they terminated 1,312 YouTube channels as part of their Chinese influence operations investigation, again saying a subset posted political content primarily in Chinese, similar to their same findings, including related to racial justice protests here in the United States. Now, the NIC wrote in an assessment from 2022, declassified in 2023, they admitted that since 2020, People's Republic of China senior leaders have issued broad directives to intensify efforts to influence U.S. policy and public opinion in China's favor. Graphica also noted this is the first time that network has published substantial volumes of English language content alongside their ongoing Chinese coverage, which means they're obviously trying to expand the scope and reach of the information they're putting out. You've got social media accounts from a pro-Chinese political spam network. That's the Spamiflage Dragon. They started posting English language videos attacking American policy, the administration of President Donald Trump, and a rhetorical confrontation between the United States and China escalated. In early 2020, they started commenting on the coronavirus pandemic. They praised the CCP's response time as when it was being accused of covering up the outbreak at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And the Chinese influence operation included a wealth of videos in English targeting the United States, especially our foreign policy at the time, in the handling of the coronavirus outbreak, racial inequalities, and its moves against TikTok. They focused on the twin crises that the U.S. was facing at that time. You had the coronavirus pandemic and the protests following the death of George Floyd. So it's interesting to think about how much we saw on social media directly inflaming racial relations here in the United States. And considering that we now know that much of it was coming from a Chinese military influence operation, how much different might things have been if the entire nation was not going after each other online and there wasn't this consistent call for racial justice as a result of George Floyd dying from a drug overdose while Derek Chauvin was trying to restrain him. So anyways, all of this is noted in a series of additional reports. There is even more to learn about what that influence operation looked like, or the information that was taken by Chinese sources, or exactly what happened with that information and just how far the influence operations went. But as of right now, we don't have anything additional, and so we are simply going to have to wait to see what comes next. All right, now, before we continue, I do have a brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. You guys, if you are a parent or a grandparent, this is just a moment to have some real conversation about the second America is about to hit a major milestone. We're coming up on our 250th birthday. That's 250 years of freedom, grit, sacrifice, and the greatest experiment in self-governance that the world has ever seen. It's the perfect moment to help your kids understand why this country matters, not just the flashy stuff or the fireworks and the hot dogs, but everything that underlies it. There is a free guide called The Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday. It's honestly just a pretty great way to introduce your kids or your grandkids to how America began. It's going to tell them who the founding fathers were, what exactly they risked, and why the ideas they fought for at that time are still relevant today. And the guide takes your kids or grandkids back to the moment when those brave men signed the Declaration of Independence. They knew at the time they were putting their lives on the line. They were risking everything, and they knew that it was all worth it. So it does it in a way that your kids can enjoy and understand. It doesn't water it down or make it feel like schoolwork. So if you care about raising kids that know where this country came from, why it's worth preserving, this is something that you're going to want to grab. The best part is it's totally free. All you do is pay $2 for shipping and handling. So very, very reasonable. You just go to freeusabirthday.com. That's freeusabirthday.com. And the Kids Guide to America's 250th Birthday is there for them today. Now, America's story matters. Make sure that the next generation knows it. Thank you very much to Rumble. Okay. So Texas Tanya, you only have a red castle if you are still a paying subscriber to the channel through Rumble. So in order to get that red castle, if you didn't do that yourself before, you must have been gifted a subscription by somebody who came in and donated on the channel. But if you do want to become an ongoing subscriber of the channel, you can go to my homepage, rumble.com/redpill78. You click that subscribe. It will sign you up for an automatic recurring $5 per month donation. And then anytime I do a Rumble premium stream, you can head on in there and hang out with us. I am going to be putting out some of my older shows on Rumble Premium as well, because I may not have necessarily as much time to just hang out and play video games as I have previously, because I've got some stuff that's going to be coming up in the next month. All right, so let's go ahead and hear from John Solomon, because it's not only China. It would appear that there was also intelligence to suggest that Ukraine was working to influence the election as well. And they wanted Joe Biden to win the 2024 election, obviously, because they believed that Donald Trump would not continue to allow them to go to war with Russia and would likely work for peace.
There are scores of raw intelligence reports that show Chinese meddling in the American election. And there's one report raising concern that Ukraine was engaged in a plot to do something bad in the 2024 election to help Joe Biden. I want to repeat that. There is intercepted intelligence that the Trump administration has had for many, many months, in which it is suggested by Ukrainian officials that they're going to try to help Joe Biden win the election using American taxpayer money. There are scores of...
Okay, so Leah Walden says, ahoy, Zach, Miss Lisa, and crew. It appears Mike Lindell is owed an apology and restitution along with many others. Well, I mean, Mike Lindell was owed an apology a long time ago. There's also information to prove that Eric Coomer has lied under oath in much the same way that the CEO of Dominion, who previously was the CEO of Dominion, John Poulos, had lied about the ability for Dominion voting systems to be connected off-site. Eric Coomer actually testified during Fani Willis's RICO investigation against President Trump and the people surrounding him. We'll see what happens with that. Let me see. He says also, if I'm not mistaken, Trump signed Executive Order 13848 on 9/12/18 regarding foreign interference of elections. I remember that because it was my birthday. It's a very important executive order. And once this information is fully declassified by the intelligence community, it would be awesome if President Trump was able to use that. But I think that ultimately it was supposed to be used against people who were citizens of the United States. And of course, in order for that to be used, we have to prove that there were United States citizens who were directly involved in profiting from this or trying to manipulate the election. And I think that everybody here believes that there's more than likely ample evidence that exists out there or has existed at one time or another. But it's just a matter of doing the investigation to prove it. Now, here is John Solomon discussing the specifics of those personal identifying information files that were stolen by some Chinese source. It would appear that there were over 100,000 American identities, which of course translates into perhaps 100,000 or more votes that could have been fraudulently cast.
By all the reporting I've done, it was widely understood by the Homeland Security Department, which employed Chris Krebs, the FBI, which employed Chris Wray, the CIA, which employed Gina Haspel, and the DNI, which was in transition at that time. Eventually, the future CIA director, John Ratcliffe, got in charge of that. That by April, there was consensus in the U.S. intelligence community that China had breached these documents. In May of 2020, the United States government learned that Iran, another bad actor, had hacked into a single state's database and stole 100,000 American voter identities. All of that was kept. When they made those statements in December 2020, that information was known by U.S. federal agencies. There were sealed indictments. There was multiple briefings, scores of raw intelligence reports, 2 or 3 completed intelligence products, where the committee writes a whole report on it, confirming that these things happen. And you have to ask yourself, who knew what when they made those comments in December? And I think that is a great opportunity for the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the President's Intelligence Advisory Board to go back and find out which officials lied to us, which officials looked in the camera and knew what they were saying wasn't true. But more importantly, right now, at this moment, there are 100 senators still flying blind beyond what I put into the public domain in the last 24 hours, which are reports, declassified. They clearly state China gained access to this voter data. Most senators don't know. Most members of Congress don't know. Most former cabinet secretaries from Trump 1 don't know. And tomorrow, we're going to put some pretty explosive documents out again, Steve. And what we're going to show people is what the intelligence ombudsman, the person who's supposed to watch the intelligence community on behalf of the American public, what that person concluded, why China intelligence about China doing bad things in the 2020 election, why it was suppressed from the American people. When you see what he concluded, you're going to be angry. The people around Donald Trump, the people who were supposed to serve that president, the man the American people elected, were trying to keep from him information he could potentially use to raise concerns about China. They kept a president in the dark, and they kept an American public and a Congress in the dark, because they had a political agenda of not letting Donald Trump score points on China. That's what you're going to see tomorrow, the documents we make public.
That is going to be the most explosive aspect of this. And if there is anyone who could get in trouble using Executive Order 13848, then those people would be chief among them. To have kept this information from the President of the United States, from Congress, from the American people, in order to ensure that Donald Trump could not use that information to securely make the election in 2020 as safe and secure as possible, to have potentially done what is happening now with the Save America Act, and even going far beyond it, it's abhorrent and it is unforgivable. It means that what we experienced during the 4 years with Joe Biden was unnecessary, could have been avoidable, and perhaps was directly related to the information that was suppressed. Now, my good friends over at Unite for Freedom have continued their work in Texas. And Harry Horry had sent me over their latest report. I'm going to see about having Harry on at the end of the week, once again, to discuss this information with us. But they say that their data analysis showed real-time manipulation of the 2026 Texas Democrat and Republican primaries. How ironic that Jasmine Crockett was saying that she felt someone cheated, which is why she didn't advance in her primary. Now, Unite for Freedom analysts have clear evidence of manipulation in early voting for both parties in the 2026 primaries in Texas. We first discovered undeniable patterns of vote and voter injections and deletions in our Texas 2022 election analysis and analyzed those real-time manipulations in the 2024 general election. The pattern repeated in the 2026 Texas primary. So they now have a pattern that has been documented and they have put it together. Democrat election showed that there were 37,039 voter IDs with, quote, oscillations. Republican election, there were 87,336 voter IDs with these oscillations. That means a voter ID appeared, disappeared, and then reappeared, sometimes multiple times during the early voting period. In the 2024 Texas vote tampering report they previously produced, clearly that got somebody's attention because this time, whoever was doing this attempted to obscure the data so that Unite for Freedom wouldn't be able to identify it. During the early voting period, the format of files on the Texas Secretary of State's website changed multiple times, and access to the data was also intermittently disrupted. But our vote tampering below data team, the best election analyst in the country, was not fooled or deterred. Unite for Freedom's reports demonstrate that the election system has been breached, and this is a national security emergency. So now, after what we just learned about China and a number of other nations having breached our systems, which are the same systems that would show who these voter IDs belong to, I believe that these two stories may be directly connected. So Harry Horry is talking about this on X. Unite for Freedom is posting their reports. You can read these reports in full. But like I said, I'm going to be reaching out to Harry and the people at Unite for Freedom, and we're going to see if we can't have him back here on Friday to discuss the finer points of exactly what they've identified. Now, my good friend Andrew Paquette, also known as @ZarkFiles on X, that's another one to follow. He produces his reports and releases them on his Substack. You can read them by going through his X account. I suggest you follow both of these individuals, both of these accounts, because they are doing incredible work to expose the election fraud still taking place here in the United States. Now, in Arizona, the investigation by the FBI into Maricopa County continues along. An article was put out by an Arizona publication. However, it's currently behind a paywall. So this is the latest that's come from this investigation of the 2020 election in Arizona. Now, we've got the recent memo from congressional staffers who toured a facility run by Runbeck Election Services about a week ago. And there was a lot of questionable stuff that was happening there. We had found boxes of blank ballots that were simply left open and unattended. In addition to that, ballots that had been filled out were in the same general vicinity as blank ballots, which of course is a major problem for the chain of custody. But the wrapping on some of the pallets of blank ballots appeared to have been ripped open, and some blank ballots had been removed. It was alarming that day after an election, those ballots and ballot envelopes were still being printed. They were then left unattended, and thousands of others were similarly positioned within this facility. Runbeck Election Services is another one of those corporate entities that I think is criminally responsible for much of the election fraud that we see here in the United States. And I would hope that the DOJ is paying attention to this as well. Now, the staffers at Runbeck lied about having nonpartisan observers. That is a lawful aspect of running an election. You have to have chain of custody. You have to have unaffiliated observers, nonpartisan, and barring nonpartisan, you got to have equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans so that everybody is watching everybody else. That was in contradiction to statements that were made to local news and journalists in Arizona. Runbeck did not actually have bipartisan teams that were running these machines. There were no election workers that were present. There were no observers that were present. And subsequently, there was no election integrity or security that was in place there either. So the FBI obviously is investigating this. They are aware of all of this. And this is just one of a number of things that the FBI said they were very disturbed to learn about. And it's how the DOJ and them were able to secure the grand jury to get the subpoena to go in and take all of this election-related material. So this investigation continues, and I think it's going to get real hot real quick. All right, now, good news out of West Virginia. A resolution to ensure that only United States citizens, in advance of the Save America Act passing, has now gone to vote in West Virginia. The House of Delegates approved Senate joint resolution in this matter by a 97-0 vote a couple of days ago on March 13th. Now, because the House Judiciary Committee slightly amended the resolutions earlier this week, SJR 9 had to be returned to the state Senate to approve the amended version, and the Senate passed this version, which is SJR 9, by a 33-0 vote on March 3rd. On March 14th, which was the final day of the session, the Senate approved the amended version with a 34-0 vote. Resolutions proposing amendments to the state constitution are adopted by a 2/3 of the members of both houses and then go directly to voters, which is a way to bypass the governor's signature. That means the issue is now going to be on this fall's general election ballot. It should pass overwhelmingly. It's going to appear as Amendment 1, and it will be called the Citizenship Requirement to Vote in West Virginia Elections Amendment. This amendment provides that in all elections held in West Virginia, only citizens of the United States who are citizens of this state are qualified to vote. That means no more illegal aliens, no more green card holders, no more permanent residents voting in any election, whether it's for dog catcher, Senate, or President of the United States. It's a broad agreement that only U.S. citizens should be able to vote in West Virginia elections. It's pretty straightforward, very common sense, and the people of West Virginia now have the opportunity to enshrine this in the law by placing it in their constitution. So wonderful news. Very proud of the citizens of West Virginia. Thank you so much to... Let's see. Filter Dog 1. San Francisco celebrates St. Patrick's Day by coloring street poop green. The poop is already green when it comes out because people have been drinking the green beer. Filter Dog 1. Newsom account against Shirley got ratioed. Yep. Newsom got 19,000. Shirley got 212,000. Trump 1 got the thank you for the cookie. Hog leg, thank you for the cookie and the can. Intolerant leftist says Senate. We didn't know, BS, we knew, and they had access to more than we do and did. Many of these new reports were out before the inauguration. So it depends on exactly how they are referencing it. Of course, there may be some bulletin that goes out and says, hey, here's some information. But what Just the News is specifically referring to is the full complement of intelligence to really dive deep into what's going on. There also may have been some notification going to a particular committee, but that doesn't mean that it was released to everybody. I think oftentimes people give the members of the House and the Senate and even, people working for the federal government far too much credit. There is so much shit going on in Washington, D.C., and there are so many issues that are constantly being put before these people. I would say and suggest to you that most members of the House and Senate, they don't read their own stuff. They certainly don't read their bills. They don't read their own emails. They don't read memos or letters that come across their desk. That stuff is going to be forwarded on to interns and assistants. And then that will be filtered and then handed over to those people. And they trust that those individuals are going to be giving them the stuff that's important. So there is a lot of stuff happening in Washington, D.C., and certainly a lot related to intelligence that is never communicated to anybody. And that's because it's gatekept and filtered by people working in those intelligence agencies who have their own political biases. And in the instance of all of this stuff related to China from 2020, there were plenty of people who wanted to make sure that Donald Trump was not going to be president again come 2021. Now, we had a bit of a surprising development in the administration early this morning. National Counterintelligence Center Director Joe Kent resigned, directly stating he was doing it over the Iran war. And he also blames Israel and their powerful American lobby for the conflict. Now, this is particularly notable because he ain't wrong. Of course, for years, AIPAC and their lobby in Washington, D.C. has had a tremendous amount of influence on the system of American governance because they own a lot of politicians. However, every single time, in my opinion, every single time the interests of certain aspects of the Israeli government and the government of the United States align, I do not believe that decisions that are being made are simply for the sole benefit of Israel. That may have been less true prior to President Trump, but I think that ultimately President Trump is making decisions based upon what he truly believes are good for the people of the United States. And that may mean a preemptive strike in order to stop Israel from going to war and causing far more death and destruction. But as I will show you, there were specific pieces of intelligence related to Iran, which led President Trump to believe that this was the right decision to make. And if you've been paying attention to President Trump since the Iranian Revolution, dude's been talking about the evil of Iran and their influence and the danger that they pose in the region since the very beginning. So this is not like he just suddenly stopped on a dime. But Joe Kent, working in the National Counterterrorism Center, was underneath Tulsi Gabbard. This is a position within the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. He was one of her key deputies And he stated in his resignation letter that Iran posed no imminent threat to America and asserted that we started the war because of pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. I do take issue with that because the administration has also stated, and even before this administration, it was stated that Iran had already set up a series of terror cells here in the United States. Now, to what degree? I can't tell you because I'm not in the intelligence community. But this was an established fact, and President Trump had also stated just the other day that the intelligence community had identified each and every one of those recently and was keeping an eye on them. So I'm going to read you the content of Joe's letter here. He said, well, first of all, in his tweet, he said, after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. Obviously, that's Joe's opinion. It has been an honor serving under POTUS and DNI Gabbard and leading the professionals at the NCTC. May God bless America. So in his letter, he writes, President Trump, after much reflection, I have decided to resign from my position as director of National Counterterrorism Center effective today. I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war with Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. It's clear we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its most powerful American lobby. I support the values and the foreign policies that you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, 2024, which you enacted in your first term. Until June of 2025, you understood that the wars in the Middle East were a trap that robbed America of the precious lives of our patriots and depleted the wealth and prosperity of our nation. In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting drawn into never-ending wars. We still haven't, but I will continue. You demonstrated this by killing Qasem Soleimani and by defeating ISIS. Soleimani was Iranian. Earlier in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that should you strike now, there was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. He ain't wrong. We cannot make that mistake again. As a veteran who deployed to combat 11 times and as a Gold Star husband who lost my beloved wife Shannon in a war manufactured by Israel, I cannot support sending the next generation off to fight and die in a war that serves no benefit to the American people nor justifies the cost of American lives. I pray that you will reflect upon what we are doing in Iran, who we are doing it for. The time for bold action is now. You can reverse course and chart a new path for our nation, or you can allow us to slip further toward decline and chaos. You hold the cards. It was an honor to serve in your administration and to serve our great nation. Now, obviously, I don't necessarily agree with Joe's rationale here. I respect the decision, and I think that if he truly doesn't believe in President Trump's tactics, it is his responsibility to resign and walk away. And, you know, obviously it's America. You're free to respectfully disagree, and he did that very respectfully. It is highly notable that someone at Joe Kent's level is calling such direct attention to that outsized power that Israel has traditionally held on the American government and our use of military force. If you look at every single one of President Trump's military decisions, it has been carefully crafted to ensure that we don't get into a forever war. Now, maybe Joe is just a little bit gun-shy, a little bit nervous, believing that we are going to fall into the same traps that America fell into previously with, you know, the lie of weapons of mass destruction, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, President Trump, and it's his call because he's the president of the United States, he believed that this was the best route to take, not only for the United States of America, but also for the nations of that region. And there's a lot more peoples living there than just the people who live in Israel. Now, if this is successful, then Iran is no longer under the thumb of an Islamic republic. It will be good not only in terms of relations between Iran and the United States, it'll be good for the relations with Iran and all of those nations in the region. It will take away the threat that Israel, I say Israel, but I'm talking about like the Zion neocons that are at levels of power within the Israeli government. Their success hinges upon their ability to point to dangerous Islamic regimes around them, which threaten their safety and security. And without that, there is no boogeyman for those Zionist neocons to point to and say, you must kill them or we must kill them. Once they're gone, then the only thing that's left is for Iran to join the international community, which they have largely not been a part of for the last 47 years since the Islamic Revolution. And once they join the international community, then we have the same situation the United States has built and fostered with nations all around the world. President Trump has ended conflicts. He has brought economic cooperation between these nations, and that brings peace. When nations are doing business with other nations, they have less of a reason to go to war and to kill the people of those nations. They have more of an interest to continue having good relations and engaging in economic trade and having a normalized opportunity to just, be friends, be good global citizens. And at the same time, exercising each nation's individual sovereignty to do what's best for their own people. That's what's at stake here. And not having another 47 years of some country that is 2 weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon, which, of course, leads to Israel getting to use a lot of their power and influence in the region and then around the world. So Joe, in the way it looks to me, Joe seems to be afraid that Israel's running the show. I don't believe that they are. I think that Israel actually will stand to lose quite a bit if President Trump is successful in this endeavor, because they're not going to have anybody that they're going to have to worry about in the region. And they're going to have to be at peace with all of these various nations because everybody else wants to be at peace. Nobody wants to be in the midst of a war. So let's take a look at what some people have said about this. We've obviously got the president who will and has commented on this, but Caroline Leavitt posted about this first. And she says, there are many false claims in this letter, but let me address one specifically, that Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. This is the same false claim that Democrats and some of the liberal media have been repeating over and over. As President Trump has clearly and explicitly stated, he had strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the United States first. This evidence was compiled from many sources and factors. President Trump would never make the decision to deploy military assets against a foreign adversary in a vacuum. I believe that wholeheartedly. Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. We can go. He applauded him for the killing of Soleimani. Soleimani was the father of the IED, and that's the reason that we went after him. He basically was out there training people, and because of him, men and women in the United States military were dying all over the place. The Iranian regime is evil. It proudly killed Americans, waged war against our country, and openly threatened us all the way up to the launch of Operation Epic Fury. It's also worth mentioning that the people of Iran, who are not radicals, they're now going to be part of the global, the Trump world order that he is creating, the golden age, if you will, and their lives are going to be infinitely better because they won't have to live under the threat of Sharia law. Iran was aggressively expanding their short-range ballistic missiles to combine with their naval assets to give themselves immunity, meaning that they would have a degree of capabilities that would give them immunity to hold us and the rest of the world hostage. Of course, they were already basically in control of the Straits of Hormuz, and if they had the military superiority to threaten anybody that came through or to take out any ship or military asset that they wanted to, obviously that's going to disrupt a lot of things. The regime aimed to use those ballistic missiles as a shield to continue achieving their ultimate goal, which has always been nuclear weapons. The president, through his top negotiators, gave the Iranian regime every single possible opportunity to abandon this unacceptable course by permanently giving up their nuclear ambitions in exchange for sanctions relief, free nuclear fuel, and potential economic partnerships with their country. That is also very, very true. The administration was in an ongoing effort to negotiate with Iran, and they simply were not willing to do it, and it led to what it led to. But they would not say yes to peace because obtaining nuclear weapons was their fundamental goal. Now, can you just imagine a world where Iran and Israel both had nukes, both pointing at each other? All it's going to take is for one stupid person with an itchy finger to say, well, you know what? If we just did it faster, then we could take them out and then we never have to worry about it. And then the entire area surrounding Iran would be completely uninhabitable. It would cause untold death and destruction for years down the line, cancer, pollution. There would be a nuclear cloud that wouldn't just hang over Iran. It would continue and fly wherever the wind blows. It would have been absolutely catastrophic. President Trump ultimately made the determination that a joint attack with Israel would greatly reduce the risk to American lives that would come from a first strike by the terrorist Iranian regime and address this imminent threat to America's national security interests. This is the other thing. If the president truly had intelligence to suggest that Iran was planning to do this, is there anybody here who believes that it would have been appropriate to allow Iran to kill Americans first? I can't imagine that anybody here would believe that. If that was truly the case, and I have no reason to doubt that they actually did have that intelligence, I think it's totally warranted to make sure that Americans did not get murdered first. All right. Now, all of this led to President Trump arriving at the determination that this military operation was necessary for U.S. national security, which is why he launched the massively successful Operation Epic Fury. The commander-in-chief determines what does and does not constitute a threat because he is the one constitutionally empowered to do so, and because the American people went to the ballot box and entrusted him and him alone to make such final judgments. Finally, the absurd allegation that President Trump made this decision based on the influence of others, even foreign countries, is both insulting and laughable. President Trump has been remarkably consistent and has said for decades that Iran can never possess a nuclear weapon. I pointed to that before. As someone who actually witnesses President Trump's decision-making process on a daily basis, I can attest to the fact that he is always looking to do what's in the best interest of the United States. Period. America first. All right. Now, we also have a comment from President Trump himself, which is, of course, something that we should take a look at. All right, so let's go ahead and pull up the clip here. And President Trump was asked about this in the Oval Office, but we've also gotten a couple of reports about Joe Kent, which call into question the exact nature of his departure. Here is President Trump.
10-second tinnitus reversing method.
President, your director of national counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that president should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon. They were, if we didn't do the attack, or if, I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear deal given to us, one of the worst deals ever made by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when?
All right, so President Trump is absolutely right. It's better for Joe Kent to be gone if he truly does disagree. However, if you'll remember, early on in Trump's administration, one of Pete Hegseth's top deputies was let go from the Pentagon. He was seemed for all intents and purposes to be a totally loyal America First guy. They claimed that he was leaking information and he was let go. Well, he has now been hired at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, and senior administration officials are calling out Joe Kent as the real leaker. Senior administration official says Joe Kent was a known leaker and was cut out of POTUS intelligence briefings months ago. He has not been part of any Iran planning discussions or briefings at all. So whatever danger Iran would have posed to the United States, Joe Kent would have had no knowledge of it. Now, official also says that the White House told DNI Gabbard that Kent should be fired for suspected leaks, but she never did. So let's go ahead and hear from Tulsi Gabbard, because she also has made a comment about this, and it's notable because she's obviously Joe Kent's boss. So Tulsi Gabbard says that Donald Trump was overwhelmingly elected by the American people to be our president and commander-in-chief. As our commander-in-chief, he is responsible for determining what is and is not an imminent threat and whether or not to take action that he deems necessary to protect the safety and security of our troops, the American people, and our country. And that is, at the end of the day, the only thing that anybody really needs to understand. Because whatever the intelligence is, we're simply not going to be told every aspect of it. And that's because we're not part of the government. But the president wakes up every day. The man gets like 4 hours of sleep. He has to consume and digest various forms of intelligence that are coming at him all throughout the day, continues to roll in throughout the night. He has a tremendous group of people working around him to help him sift through all of that stuff. And I think he's ultimately done a pretty good job in the second administration in surrounding himself with people who are going to be honest with him about it and tell him what the hell is really going on, unlike the first administration. She continues by saying the Office of the Director of National Intelligence is responsible for helping coordinate and integrate all intelligence to provide the president and commander-in-chief with the best information available to inform his decisions. After carefully reviewing all the information before him, President Trump concluded that the terrorist Islamist regime in Iran posed an imminent threat, and he took action based on that conclusion. Now, Tulsi notably does not specifically endorse President Trump's conclusion, but she is correct. He is the commander-in-chief. It's his job to interpret and then make that decision. She also doesn't mention Kent in that statement, but she has notably previously been a vocal opponent of war with Iran prior to taking office. However, since taking office, she has backed up POTUS on every single thing that he's done, and she has most notably not come out and tried to take a stance against him. And she's also certainly not decided to step down since any of this has happened or based upon any of the decisions that President Trump has made. So Tulsi Gabbard is also currently the one who is preparing that new release for the American people and the president and Congress about everything related to election security. That includes the trip that she made to the Philippines. That includes the raid on the warehouse in Fulton County. That includes the seizure of all of that election-related material in Maricopa County. And likely there are going to be other seizures of information, records, electronic voting machines from a number of jurisdictions around the country. Tulsi Gabbard is focused on that. And then she's focused on the whole of the intelligence product coming from every single agency in the federal government. So I think that Tulsi Gabbard, if she had a problem with what was going on, she would step back and she would say, I don't agree with what the president's doing and I cannot serve him because of that. Now, we also had a response from a Gold Star wife, somebody who, much like Joe Kent, lost their spouse as a result of Islamic attacks. So Cheryl Ann says, Gold Star wife here. When ISIS killed your wife, because Joe Kent's wife was killed by ISIS, you supported going after the people responsible. You understood exactly why we were fighting and never called it Israel's war. My husband, Alan, was killed by Iranian proxies in Iraq. And now, after decades, the fight is finally leading back to the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world. You understood it when it was your loss. Now you're minimizing it when it was mine. You don't get to redefine this war just because it's not your grief anymore. And I think she's absolutely warranted in saying that. No reason to follow Joe Kent anymore because he's not going to be part of the administration. But she's absolutely correct. And this is something that you see quite often, unfortunately. Now, we also have others who are saying the exact same thing that I said just a moment ago, that there is more to the Joe Kent story than meets the eye. This time, Buzz Patterson. Buzz obviously is a retired military guy, tends to have some pretty solid sources within the administration. According to friends, apparently Joe leaked intelligence under the nose of the Pentagon, the Secretary of War. As a result, his access to classified information was removed several weeks ago. He's not stepping down due to his allegiance to integrity. He is being forced to leave. Now, if that's the case, then he's using the Iran situation to absolve himself of any responsibility or the implication that perhaps he did exactly what people are suggesting he did. Now, I need to take you to the post from my buddy Hans Mankey about Dan. Here we go. All right, Dan Caldwell. That was his name. Hans says, I don't know exactly what happened with Dan Caldwell at the Pentagon, other than the fact that he was fired. What I do know is that as soon as that happened, he revealed that the Pentagon was still maintaining the Defense Policy Board. It was stacked with absolutely horrific anti-Trump figures and deeply incompetent people like Susan Rice and Colin Kahl. That disclosure alone was a real public service. Not long after that, the board was finally dissolved, albeit much too late. Beyond that, it's good to see people who were eaten up by the machine being brought back into that tent. So Dan Caldwell is now being hired back in at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. An investigation into those alleged leaks concluded with no evidence of wrongdoing by Caldwell or the others who were accused at that time. What I really think happened is that either somebody was leaking, maybe it was Joe Kent, who knows. They tried to blame Dan Caldwell and the others for those leaks. And because the administration was going so hard against anybody who might be leaking, they took decisive action before an investigation had been completed. It also could just be that Dan Caldwell was trying to raise awareness about that board, which included Susan Rice, and they took the action to try to destroy him and get him fired before he could be successful in that. To their chagrin, Dan was successful, although he was no longer at the Pentagon. But now I think he's a real American patriot, and he's back at ODNI. Don't know exactly what he's going to be doing, but he is going to be advising senior intelligence officials responsible for coordinating the 18 federal intelligence agencies and preparing the president's daily intelligence briefing. So that means Dan is going to be in an even more relevant position to ensure that the president is getting the best intelligence possible on a daily basis. So I think that's great. Now, Wombs R Us says that, yes, Kent's resignation comes one day after a leak ring in intelligence was busted. Look at his history, Dem until recently. Yes, he was a Democrat, and then I believe he became a libertarian for a period, or maybe he was a libertarian and then became a Democrat. This is even after President Trump was elected. Then he became a Republican, I think, in 2021, and then he wanted to be part of the administration, and here we are. But I did not know that there was a specific leak ring that was busted in intelligence yesterday. If anybody has a link and you want to send that over, I'd like to pull that up. Kara Maga says, great show, and thanks for being here for us. Thank you so much to both of you. Also, G. Fontes says, President Trump has long been in social circles with those who closely followed the always moving crude oil price and how many ways Iran would affect it by plus 10% overnight and affecting the world's economy. Yeah, President Trump has always been focused on the issue. Siesta Randy, thank you very much for that donation via Rumble Wallet. Let me see, was there a message? No message that accompanied it, but I appreciate it. Now, also, like to take a listen to this clip right here from President Trump talking in large part about the game that he's currently playing. And I think that this is always notable to remember. President Trump has a tremendous amount of information, people, personalities, problems that he is juggling on a daily basis. And I think that he is the most successful president in American history. That is, while at the same time trying to unravel all of the shit that was put in place under past administrations. Take a listen to this.
I think, I said it this morning, I think it's a very small price to pay. And frankly, I thought it was going to go down much more. I assumed that it was going to go down much more, only because people don't understand to a large, it's a big chess game. at a very high level. It's a very high level chess, the highest. And I'm dealing with very smart players. These are smart people. They don't get there. You know, when you deal with some of these people, you're dealing with high level intellect, very high IQ people. These are not Jasmine Crockett and her group. These are smart people. These are really smart people, and violent people, and vicious people, and some very nice people. And some are very nice but violent. They turn violent. But you know what? If I didn't do what I did, we would have been hit. Number one, very important, was the termination of Obama's horrible deal. And number two, this beautiful plane hitting them 8 months ago, whatever it was, and taking out their nuclear capacity. That totally threw them for a loop. If they had that bomb at either time, 5 years ago or 7 months ago, if they had that bomb would have been used almost immediately.
Now, if anybody here has ever played chess, you're not just making moves on the fly. You are thinking ahead. You're attempting to anticipate your opponent's moves, and then you're attempting to anticipate what your move should be after that and what they're going to do next, how this is supposed to play out the quickest and most successful way to beat your opponent into submission. Either take their king or force them to lay it down. So if you don't think that President Trump and his team have thought this out long in advance, if you think he's making decisions on a daily basis just without truly thinking about the ramifications of what might happen, or, you know, what's the best way to do it to keep as many people alive as possible, then I think that you're sorely misinformed about who this man is, or more importantly, about what game is actually being played. This is tremendously complicated, and most people could not do it. I think a lot of people look at the president, they look at what is happening inside the federal government, and they just assume that they would or could do something different. But the truth of the matter is, they could never even get there. Okay, that's just not the way it works. Because if you could get there, you would. You would already be there. You would be doing something else. You would be influencing people surrounding President Trump, making those decisions. But you're not. Okay, and the people who are have done it for a variety of different reasons. Either because, like President Trump, they truly want what is best for America. They want to unravel the evil that was put in place before he came in. Or maybe they want to perpetuate that evil. Maybe they want to profit from that evil as much as they can. Maybe they just want power and influence. Maybe, just maybe, they're trying to subvert the president. There are plenty of those people. And like he said, these people are intelligent, they're cunning, they're ruthless, they're very smart, and sometimes they are extremely, extremely evil. For most people at that level, the death of someone like you or me means absolutely nothing. The death of thousands, millions of people in a foreign country, it's not even a blip on their radar. But right now, President Trump is trying to bring peace and prosperity to the entirety of the world. And I think he's doing an excellent job. All right, before we continue, I have another message from our friends over here at Rumble. You guys, they can freeze your accounts, they can shut off your cards, they can lock you out of your money overnight because banks do not protect you. They control you, and they know it. They are why real financial freedom starts with ownership. So in order to achieve that, they are now introducing the Rumble Wallet. It's a non-custodial wallet. It's built for people who refuse to give up control, because with Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether. You can own Tether Gold. That is real gold. It's on the blockchain. And with Tether Gold, you get direct ownership of physical gold bars. Each one of those bars is fully allocated, verifiable by serial number, purity, and weight. It's not paper gold. It's not an IOU. It's real gold without bank vaults, storage fees, or gatekeepers, so you can buy it, sell it, or move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when traditional gold markets are closed. And if you want, you can even redeem it for physical gold bars. That, my friends, is power. So when you support content creators like myself on Rumble, like Siesta Randy just did, you can tip them directly using that Rumble wallet because it's peer-to-peer. It's totally outside the banking system, and there's no permission, there's no middlemen, there's no cancel button. The wallet is yours permanently, forever. So to get it, you can go to the App Store on your phone. You can go to wallet.rumble.com, or you can go to the link that you're going to see in the chat right there. Thank you very much once again to the people at Rumble. All right. And thank you very much to Intolerant. I already said thank you to Intolerant Leftists. Thank you to One Thunder for the can. Okay. Just a couple of quick updates on some things right here. And this goes to the concept of that chess game that President Trump is currently playing. You know, how many times have I said and have echoed in the chat from you guys, my friends here, that the United States should probably just pull out of NATO? What has President Trump been doing since he came back into office? He has been effectively reducing the importance and the necessity for NATO to even exist by creating relationships with countries that were traditionally set up to be those global boogeymen. Now, what is NATO? It's a cooperative of different nations who are supposed to back each other up. Article 5 is the incentive that requires NATO nations to come to the aid of partner nations if there is a war or if there is a conflict. And right now, we are certainly in a conflict with Iran. And as a result, President Trump suggested that NATO nations should be helping out in the Straits of Hormuz. At the very least, they should deploy their resources there to help keep the straits open so that gas and oil can continue to flow from the Gulf of Oman through the straits into the Gulf of Arabia. And they all said no. So President Trump, he also got all of the nations to start paying their own way instead of the United States paying to keep NATO open. He also took American military body man hours away from running NATO, told everybody else that they had to start running it. And now, latest move in that chess game is for President Trump to suggest that the United States might just pull out of NATO altogether. Take a listen.
Are you rethinking the United States' relationship with NATO possibly getting out?
Well, I'm disappointed in NATO that we spend trillions of dollars on NATO. Think of it, trillions over the years, many trillions of dollars. It's one of the reasons we have deficits and we help other countries. And when they don't help us, I mean, it's certainly something that we should think about. I don't need Congress for that decision, as you probably know. I can make that decision myself. I'd work with some very smart people. And I'd always deal with Congress anyway, but I don't need Congress for that decision. But you know, when you say rethink, I have nothing currently in mind, but I will say that I'm not exactly thrilled when we help them with Ukraine. Look, Ukraine would have been over in one day if we didn't help. Frankly, Ukraine would have been over in the first day. They had the best equipment in the world. It was our equipment, given by Sleepy Joe Biden. No charge, no charge. Hundreds of billions of dollars of the best equipment in the world. No charge. I will say that I'm not happy about it.
So why does NATO even exist? Well, the only reason it's existed all these years is ostensibly to be a foil against Russia. If President Trump creates the golden age and brings peace to the entire world, NATO becomes irrelevant because there is no longer a threat. They don't have to worry in Europe about Russia attacking them. The United States doesn't have to worry about getting into thermonuclear war with Russia. Another reason NATO existed is because the United States funded it, because the United States continued to keep the money flowing and provided the bodies to ensure that NATO continued. Without the United States, NATO does not exist. In a world where the golden age and ultimate lasting peace is the order of the day, where the New World Order and the deep state are no longer in power, NATO becomes irrelevant. And President Trump just proved by asking NATO allies to get involved simply to be a steward for ships going through the Straits of Hormuz, that NATO has no reason to exist any longer. Patty Ninefinger says, happy St. Patrick's Day to you and your lovely bride. Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate it. So yes, I think that NATO's days are numbered. And once again, it's only because of the brilliant brinksmanship of President Donald J. Trump. Now, United Nations would be next. And United Nations has already been shown to be irrelevant by the creation of the Board of Peace. United Nations has done nothing to ensure peace and prosperity around the world. It's simply a body that siphons up money from all of their member nations. In addition to the creation of the Board of Peace, you've got member nations who are just refusing to pay their dues to the United Nations. They're about to go bankrupt. So I think that ultimately the United States will go ahead and help shut down the UN as well. Perhaps the Board of Peace can then set up in the space, the building that is currently occupied by the United Nations. And we will finally have a global body of sovereign nations that come together to work out their disputes amicably and ensure that peace is lasting and real. Now, Rick Grenell announced this week that he was going to be stepping down from his position at the Kennedy Center. And Rick Grenell has done some really incredible work for the administration over the years. While he was there at the Kennedy Center, he exposed $26 million in fake revenue. He exposed the Kennedy Center's catastrophic financial collapse. They had zero cash reserves. They had massive debt on hand. You and I were paying for all of that. They had turned the Kennedy Center into a perverted, God-hating organization that was pushing DEI and trans indoctrination on people under the guise of the arts. Hollywood elites, these Trump-hating artists, they boycotted performances in temper tantrums against President Trump's vision to turn the Kennedy Center back into a bastion of true beauty and a place for the arts to exist without the threat of political intervention. And in the last year, Rick Grenell has had real results with a fair amount of pushback from the people who were previously benefiting from the Kennedy Center. This is what the radical left has been so afraid of. Now, you don't have to agree with Rick Grenell's lifestyle. He is a gay man, but many of the people that Rick Grenell is pissing off are also gay. And that's another thing that they hate, ultimately, that somebody who is a gay person is aligned with President Trump. And I just love the irony of it. So President Trump announced Friday Grenell is stepping down from his role. Matt Flocka, he's the center's vice president of facilities operations. He's going to be taking over as chief operating officer and as executive director. Now, people speculated that Grenell maybe had been fired, but President Trump spoke up pretty quickly and he said, hey, that's not true. Totally false. You're talking political BS. And he said Grenell was not fired. He is still going to remain a valued figure within the administration. He's just going to transition to something else. He said there was a story that he got fired, but he didn't get fired. He was here for a short period of time, for a year, figuring it out with Matt and everybody else, and now Matt's going to take over. So now that Trump is transitioning the center, and that includes major renovations and now a new CEO, the New York Times sent a hack left-wing journalist named Elizabeth Williamson in to try to get Rick Grenell in a gotcha moment. And Grenell actually put her on blast on X and published their text message conversation to show what a disingenuous hack she is. So he said, Elizabeth Williams isn't a journalist. She's a left-wing hack who lies about Republicans all the time. I'm not falling for her agenda-driven tactics. I'm exposing her. Here is the text exchange I just had with her proving that she lies, and her @ is New York Times Liz. She should be fired. Can you imagine putting in writing that you will just say that I declined to comment because you don't like the comment I gave you? The New York Times should launch an investigation into her previous work. And she writes and says, "Hi, Rick. It's Elizabeth Williamson from the New York Times. I'm writing about your being replaced at the helm of the Kennedy Center. I know the president said he's looking for your next venture, but any ideas what you'll do next? Any general comment on what has proven to be a turbulent year for you in the administration? Thanks." Of course, she's already insinuating that there's trouble in paradise. And he says, here's my on the record comment. "You are such a left-wing hack who is not interested in the truth, but interested in attacking Republicans and manipulating the news for your own far-left agenda. Anyone looking at your body of work realizes that you've lost an agenda." And I have to go to the next one. Oh, gosh, and I can't read the rest of it. "That you've just got an agenda that incentivizes anything against conservatives." And she says, I watched it live. It would be great if you would answer the questions I sent, or we'll write you decline to answer them. Your choice. Thanks." He says, "I didn't decline to answer them. LOL. You just don't get you just don't get to approve the answers. Once more, the president said he's looking for your next venture, but any ideas on what you'll do next? Any general comment on what has proven to be a turbulent year for you in the administration? Thanks." And he says, "It's quite shocking to see that you would say that I declined to answer simply because you don't like my answer. Do you think your editor would approve of my answer?" And then I can't read the rest of it. But she actually replies with the article that she wrote about him. And it's behind a paywall, but it says that it's a gifted article. So I don't know if the New York Times, they will allow you to actually read it. And let's see, what does she actually say? "Mr. Grinnell did not respond to questions about his future and his turbulent year. Instead, he sent a text message criticizing the New York Times coverage of Republicans and conservatives." Well, because she's a disingenuous hack. "Liz, you ignorant slut. Rick Grinnell answered your question. You should go ahead and print what he had responded with." Anyways, I think Rick Grinnell is great. All right, now, Judge Mark Pittman. Judge Mark Pittman is the judge that oversaw the cases that we've been speaking about in Texas, the Prairieland ICE facility attack that was effectuated by Antifa members. Again, all of them were found guilty of the charges they were hit with. Antifa is now threatening the wife of Judge Mark Pittman, and they are vowing to get retaliation for the convicted comrades that will be going to prison for many decades. Members of Antifa are threatening violence and accusing the wife of Judge Pittman of being a fan of white supremacist, that's a direct quote, Charlie Kirk, in the wake of their 9 members of their militant far-left group being found guilty of various charges, including terrorism-related charges on Friday. What's even more incredible about this case is that since it was the first Antifa terrorism case to be prosecuted in the United States, it will give precedence for future prosecutions to be able to come down. And because these people are making direct terroristic threats against the wife of a judge, they may be charged for themselves in this instance. Now, in the wake of the killing of Charlie Kirk during that Utah campus stop last year, U.S. District Judge Mark Pittman's wife wrote, "Keep spreading the good news, Bishop. The world needs it more than ever. Come, Lord Jesus, come." Well, an Antifa member screenshotted her Facebook post, posted it to X, and wrote that Pittman's wife is a big fan of white supremacist Charlie Kirk. Well, of course, Charlie Kirk wasn't a white supremacist, but that's neither here nor there. Now that those 9 members of the North Antifa Texas cell have been convicted on various charges for that attack on the ICE detention facility in Texas last July, where an officer was shot, you had 8 of the 9 defendants found guilty of providing material support to terrorists. Additional charges they were found guilty on include rioting, using an explosive device, and attempted murder. In addition to going after the judge's wife, Antifa affiliates have threatened violence against members of the jury, as well as the post-millennial editor-at-large, Andy No. One person wrote F the jury in response to the guilty verdicts, and another person wrote kill, not F. One Antifa account wrote on social media, Andy No is a Nazi terror propagandist who has incited multiple massacres. The fact that his identity and location is known, yet he continues to operate freely, is a condemnation of the Western left. Now, responding to a photo that stated, Andy No is a threat to our community, another person wrote, reminder, as anarchists are getting imprisoned on bogus charges to watch out for this Nazi and Fed-loving snitch. There was another account who wrote in response to the verdict, the only appropriate response for the Prairie Land defendants is retaliation. Don't let the fascist state go unpunished. I say, bring it, you limp-wristed faggots. Like, let's go. Anyways, these people are just digging themselves a deeper hole. And if they continue and the government is able to identify who they are, likely all of them are going to be brought up on charges. That's exactly what I want. I want every single one of these people to be charged, and I want them to be imprisoned because they are truly terrorists. Now, from terrorists in Antifa to terrorists in the judiciary. This is the story that I made mention of in the very early portion of the show. As I have said, probably one of the biggest things that we have facing us is the corruption within the federal judiciary. And Julie Kelly has covered these decisions by these judges fairly well. She is obviously able to get into the courtrooms. She's got access to the documents. And anytime there is a case that I need to go and reference, I'm going and looking to see what Julie Kelly has. We have, in this instance, a decision by a judge, a rogue judge in New Jersey. And essentially, this judge is doing what many other federal judges have done around the country. They're effectively acting as a judge, jury, and executioner. This time, it's Judge Zahid N. Karashi, a Biden appointee. He went completely off the rails yesterday. He removed the head of the New Jersey U.S. Attorney's Office of Appeals. At one point, he threatened to have court security remove him. Why? Because apparently he failed to file an appearance in a child pornography case, and then he warned that he would force prosecutors to testify under oath about the leadership structure of the office. How are these prosecutors, even when they're in their positions, how are they expected to be able to carry on with their jobs when they have to worry about this kind of bullshit coming from the judges who are running their district? This is following the exact same type of unconstitutional and dangerous patterns that we've seen federal judges take in this second term of President Trump's time as president, taking on both roles of prosecutor and judge. By doing this, they are explicitly working to sabotage the executive branch. A few weeks ago, we had that judge in Minnesota who held a contempt trial, forcing top DOJ officials and one ICE official to testify about the handling of items that belong to illegals in custody. These people are illegal. Who cares? Ship their stuff back to their home countries and send them with them. This is completely beyond the boundaries of anything that should be acceptable. These judges are out of control. And much like myself and many other people here, Julie says, I see no solutions from Congress or even the DOJ as to how to stop it. Now, of course, the DOJ, the only thing they can do is file continuous motions in court, continuing to fight this in the courtroom space. But Congress is the one who truly should be addressing this. We had an opportunity to impeach Judge James Boasberg, and that went nowhere because Congress has no balls. These prosecutors should not have to deal with these diabolical judges threatening their careers and even threats to put them in jail. It is time to do something. And I think that we have a potential effort coming from America First Legal. Now, they have recently sent this letter to the Judiciary GOP chairman, Jim Jordan, to investigate what we're seeing in Minnesota, in New Jersey, and in other places. These are always in blue states. And there is this practice of NGOs and judges working on behalf of these NGOs, suing the Trump administration, not having any evidence against them, but filing frivolous lawsuits and hoping to hamper the efforts of the executive branch to bring about the changes that you, I, and all of us want to see. So they are asking for a request to investigate Democrat-controlled states' use of lawfare, despite lacking any cognizable injury. So America First Legal has uncovered a nationwide pattern to subvert the agenda of the Trump administration. Democrat-controlled states have filed lawsuits against the administration, yet in many states, the states are unable to show any support for their alleged injuries. AFL requests that the House Committee on Judiciary examine legislative options to eliminate judicial review of lawfare by states unable to show actual injuries. This is just one part of the problem that we're talking about. But again, it goes to Congress. Why is it Congress? Because under House Rule X10, Clause 1L, the committee has exclusive jurisdiction over matters relating to federal courts and the administration of justice, including Title VIII of the United States Code and the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. This jurisdiction is relevant to Article 3 standing requirements, the constitutional prerequisites that determine who may invoke the power of federal courts. The committee, therefore, has the authority to investigate whether these state-led lawsuits satisfy standing requirements and, if warranted, to consider legislative remedies that appropriately cabin these sorts of political disputes from judicial review. To have Article 3 standing to sue in federal court, a plaintiff must show that the plaintiff suffered concrete injury in fact. Justice Thomas, in his dissent in TransUnion versus Ramirez, clarified that where an individual sued based on the violation of a duty owed broadly to the whole community, courts required not only to show this damage that was done, but a number of other pieces as well. But that continues to happen. These cases are allowed to come to court, and all too often, the judges are politically motivated and they're buying in. So it is long past time for a review of these judges in every single jurisdiction to be done, and to put a stop to these fraudulent and completely frivolous cases, which only are being filed to try to stop the administration from doing what they want to do. This doesn't happen under Democrat-led administrations. It only seems to happen to President Trump. And everybody around with the power to do something about it seems to have no problem with it. Now, recently, I had let you know that Jeffrey Clark was going to be leaving the federal government. He was going to be moving on to something else. And it would appear that we now know what Jeffrey Clark is going to do. He has left the Department of Justice to come in at the Oversight Project as the Vice President of Litigation. So here is the official announcement. Former DOJ official Jeffrey Clark is joining the Oversight Project as VP for Litigation. Clark most recently served in the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs at OMB. The Oversight Project was formed by the Heritage Foundation in 2022 and became its own entity in 25. The Oversight Project is just getting started, but hopefully the message is out that we mean business and we are here to stay. Oversight Project, Mike Howell said in this announcement. So I think that this is probably going to be a great fit. Oversight Project is doing really good work. They've already brought some incredible things forward. Heritage Foundation, as a policy crafting organization, a think tank, they have for years been great on this stuff. And I think Jeff Clark is going to be in good company. All right. Now, we also have an update on James Comey's case. So let's go ahead and take a look at this from Paul Sperry. In the most recent filings in the James Comey appeal, the DOJ argues that for all the ink they spill, the defendants and their squad of amici do not refute the simple logic showing that the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, lawfully appointed Lindsay Halligan to the position of U.S. Attorney under the plain terms of 28 U.S.C. 546 and was fully authorized to indict Comey on criminal charges. I made reference to this earlier in the show. But the DOJ's reply brief then makes the following points of fact. And this is notable because it just goes to show that what James Comey and his attorneys claimed early on to get their case dismissed had no basis in fact. And the judge, obviously, that was overseeing that case simply sided with Comey because they didn't like President Trump and they didn't want James Comey to get in trouble. The Attorney General may appoint a U.S. attorney for the district in which the office of the U.S. attorney is vacant. In this case, that's exactly what happened. No one disputes the office was vacant. The statute contains a single express exception to the AG's appointment power, and that is for individuals whom the Senate voted down. The Senate has never voted on Lindsay Halligan. No one disputes that the Senate never rejected Halligan's nomination. The Attorney General's appointment carries a maximum term of 120 days, but nothing in the statutory text limits the AG to only one such appointment, which means that, theoretically, the Attorney General could continue to appoint interim U.S. attorneys or could continue to appoint that individual, in this case, Lindsay Halligan, to additional and successive terms of 120 days. So it follows then that the AG was fully empowered to appoint Halligan, even though a previous interim appointment, Eric Siebert, had served. Now, the claims from the Comey legal team are that because Lindsay Halligan was the second interim appointment, because Eric Siebert was not the person who was still running the office when James Comey was indicted, that somehow Lindsay Halligan's appointment was ineffective or somehow outside of the boundary of the rules. But it's not. It was perfectly fine. And hopefully this appeal is going to solidify that, and the criminal indictments against James Comey and Letitia James are going to be back in effect. And then we can go ahead and bring those people to justice, and we can ensure that they are held to criminal account as they need to be. All right. And finally, we'll go ahead and close it out with this. So the House Oversight Committee has just issued a formal subpoena requiring Attorney General Pam Bondi to appear for a deposition as part of their probe into the Epstein case and its handling by the Department of Justice. So the letter was sent out, and they are specifically going to be testifying. Todd Blanche is also part of this subpoena, testifying about possible mismanagement of the federal government's investigation into Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and Miss Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't think that's in dispute. But certainly it wasn't this administration or Pam Bondi's Department of Justice that mismanaged it. However, they are going to be asking about the Epstein releases that have come out. So the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform is reviewing the possible mismanagement of the federal government's investigation of Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, the circumstances and subsequent investigations of Mr. Epstein's death, that is notable, the operation of sex trafficking rings and ways for the federal government to effectively combat them, the ways in which Epstein and Maxwell sought to curry favor and exercise influence to protect their illegal activities, and potential violations of ethics rules related to elected officials. This testimony is going to be coming up on April 14th. They will also have questions regarding the Department of Justice's handling of the investigation into Epstein and his associates and its compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. As Attorney General Pam Bondi, you are directly responsible for overseeing the department's collection, review, and determinations regarding the release of files pursuant to the Epstein Files Transparency Act, and the committee therefore believes you possess valuable insight into these efforts. The committee may use these results of the investigation to inform legislative solutions to improve federal efforts to combat sex trafficking, amen, and reform the use of non-prosecution agreements, hallelujah, and or plea agreements in sex crime investigations. There should be none. There should never be a non-prosecution agreement or a plea agreement for child sex traffickers. Those people should get the fullest extent of punishment available under the law, up to and including death. So the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform is the principal oversight committee, using broad authority under all of their powers. And if you have any questions, please give us a call. Come on in and we'll talk about it. All right. So obviously, much of the investigation into the Epstein situation occurred under past administrations. However, during President Trump's first administration, the Department of Justice seems to have dropped the ball on that, and that needs to be investigated. Most importantly, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell continued to get passes, even though Epstein was eventually arrested. He was subsequently removed from the story, either whisked off to a beach in a foreign land or placed in hiding someplace else, or, unlikely was actually killed. Certainly didn't kill himself, but somebody died in his place, I believe. And Ghislaine Maxwell appears to be the only other person who was ever convicted or even charged as a result. There were many other people who were involved in Jeffrey Epstein's dealings. The New Mexico investigation of Zorro Ranch remains ongoing to this day, but there are still thousands of pages of documents that were handed over by New Mexico to the Southern District of New York. You know who I really want them to call in to subpoena? Maureen Comey. I want to hear from Maureen Comey, because Maureen Comey was the centerpiece of the SDNY. And Maureen Comey certainly would have had access to all of those files that were somehow missing and then were found again later by this administration. Maureen Comey also would have been responsible for hiding all of that information coming from New Mexico. Maureen Comey, of course, also just happens to be the daughter of one James Comey, one of the biggest living members of the modern deep state apparatus. So there are plenty of questions that should be answered, and I think that she is one of those people who needs to answer them. All right, real quick, before we take off for the day, you guys, if you still haven't tried 1775 coffee, you now have an opportunity. They have some of those starter kits available. In those starter kits, you're going to get their bold dark roast. It hits nice and hard. Their smooth medium roast goes down a treat, and then their Vitality mushroom coffee that's going to give you clean energy and laser focus, but without the crash of traditional brews. It's all made from the highest quality beans, small batch, toxin and mold-free, single origin. Not all coffees can say that. You're also going to get a couple of free goodies with the starter kit, that gold spoon clip, the strong frother, and also a black 1775 tumbler. It's $170 worth of coffee and gear, and it's all yours for only $99. This is for the people who have been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble and wonder if it's actually worth it. It truly is, and to find out for yourself, you can go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab one of those starter kits before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does. Thank you very much, and thank you to you at home. All right, now, let us give our final thank yous over here. It looks like the last one goes to Filter Dog for the can. I do appreciate it. All right, you guys, we're going to go ahead and close it out. I want to thank everybody for being here. Hope you had a great day. Had a lot of fun on today's show. Looking forward to being back here with you tomorrow at 5 p.m. for another episode of Red Pill News Live. Check out the all-time sponsors of the program. They're in the description of this video, whether it's my friends at Tamarack Gardens or onenessdrops.com/redpill78 or mypillow.com. Use code RP78 or rncstore.com/redpill78. All the information, the codes, and your discounts are all available below. Anytime you buy these products, you are supporting the show, just a very small amount, and over time it adds up, and it really helps me stay on the air. So good luck. God bless. I hope you have a great night, and I will see you on the next one. I'm going to send you guys over to Pixels. Do me a favor and say hi for me. Tell him I love him. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Love y'all. Bye.